Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. There was no doubt left. A monstrous physique capable of kicking the white whale away, swordsmanship praised by both the sword saint and the finest knight, and an inhuman level of magic power and mastery. Wood was, by all accounts, a genuine monster, lacking any visible weakness. Reinhard may have been considered a cheat, but he also had his flaws. His poor strategic thinking and inability to use magic. Wood, on the other hand, had it all. Strength, swordsmanship, and magic. All at the highest level, even surpassing human limits. In a way, Wood was more of a monster than Reinhard. A flawless beast with overwhelming power. With the mist blown away, the surroundings were now clearly visible. Seeing Wood standing next to the white whale, which had carved a trench into the ground, everyone present was stunned. Because of the mist, they had heard the white whale's cries and felt the tremors, but they hadn't imagined that the fearsome white whale, one of the 3 great beasts that had plagued the world for over 400 years, had already fallen to Wood. GRR. With the mist cleared, the remaining 2 clones of the white whale also came into view. Both were heavily wounded from their fierce battle with an elderly gentleman. One of the clones, seeing Wood, immediately abandoned its fight with the sword demon Wilhelm and charged straight at Wood's position. Chapter 368, The Sin Archbishop of Sloth defeated by purification magic. There are actually 3 mist beasts? No, this one lacks the magical power of the one lying on the ground. In other words, a mere imitation, and you still dare challenge me? Though the white whale's clone didn't match the original in strength, its massive body, over 50 meters long, was undeniably real. Regardless of its magical power or abilities, its sheer size alone, crashing down, could crush even the sturdiest beastman to a pulp in an instant. 100 Ghosts sword style, 1 sword technique, Joragamo. As the clone, resembling a giant airborne yacht, lunged toward him, Wood stood his ground, gripping his knight's sword tightly. Black armament hockey spread from his arm, like a climbing vine, swiftly coating the knight's sword in a pitch-black layer. As the blade moved, streaks of blue were left behind in the air, forming an enormous web of slashes in front of Wood. Wood moved so quickly that most onlookers couldn't even see his arm swing. When the white whale's clone charged toward Wood, it hadn't anticipated the sudden appearance of the blue web. Driven by instinct, the clone sensed danger. However, it was too late to stop, and all it could do was trust its durable white fur to protect it as it crashed forward. Blood splattered as the clone's massive body collided with a web of slashes. Its white fur, which was resistant to both magic and physical attacks, offered no protection this time. The colossal clone was instantly shredded, its body dismembered into huge chunks of flesh, like blocks of tofu, falling from the sky. Everyone who witnessed this scene stood in utter shock. Ordinary swords could only leave faint marks on the white whale's tough exterior. Even sword demon Wilhelm, a formidable warrior, could only wound it without causing any truly lethal damage. But now, what were they seeing? One of the 3 great beasts, a creature that had wreaked havoc for over 400 years, was dismantled in the blink of an eye. Though the clones were not as powerful as the original, their physical strength was nearly identical, except for their lack of advanced regenerative abilities. With 1 clone eliminated, Wilhelm quickly dispatched the other, which was already badly injured. As Wilhelm landed, he looked at the dismembered clone and the unconscious body of the white whale, his expression complicated. No one knew better than Wilhelm how powerful the white whale was. After all, his wife, Thersia, had died at its hands. Over the years, Wilhelm had tirelessly honed his swordsmanship while searching for the white whale's whereabouts. He knew all too well that compared to a long-lived magical beast, a human's lifespan was brief, as were their peak years of strength. When he received news of the white whale from Julius, Wilhelm had believed that, with his power and the support of the Karsten family, he could finally avenge his wife. However, when he faced the white whale, Wilhelm realized just how naive his hopes had been. The white whale could split itself into 2 powerful clones, and he could barely handle even these 2, let alone defeat the original. When the Sin Archbishop of Sloth from the witch's cult intervened, Wilhelm understood that this hunt was doomed to fail. Even when Cross ordered a retreat, Wilhelm had no intention of leaving. The reason was simple. Though the white whale appeared often, tracking it was a challenging task due to its abilities. At his age, Wilhelm wasn't sure he'd have another chance to face the creature that had killed his wife. When Cross ordered the withdrawal, Wilhelm chose to stay and fight to the death. He had made up his mind before coming here. If he couldn't kill the white whale, he would die trying. Unfortunately, the white whale's strength exceeded his expectations, and his aging body couldn't even manage a mutual destruction. While Wilhelm battled the two clones in the mist, determined to at least kill them to buy time for Cross and the others to escape, the thick mist around them was suddenly dispersed. To Wilhelm's disbelief, when the mist cleared, the original white whale lay before a young man, its horn broken and its fate uncertain. In his daze, one of the clones slipped past his attacks and charged at the young man on the ground. Wilhelm didn't know how the original had been taken down, but seeing Wood standing by its side, he was certain this young man had something to do with it. For such a young knight to defeat the white whale was a remarkable feat. Wilhelm assumed the knight must be exhausted, and if the clone's sneak attack succeeded, he wouldn't even get a chance to repay the favor. But just as Wilhelm abandoned everything, disregarding the other clone attacking from behind in his attempt to save Wood, the young knight he thought was spent suddenly made a move. In the next instant, Wilhelm was stunned to see that the knight on the ground didn't need any help. The clone that had given Wilhelm such a hard time couldn't withstand even a single strike from Wood and was cut into pieces. Wilhelm had once been called the Sword Demon. And before the current Sword Saint Reinhard had risen, he was the strongest swordsman in Lunica. Even his wife, the former Sword Saint Thersia, couldn't defeat him. Though old age had weakened him, Wilhelm was certain that his swordsmanship was still among the top 3 in all of Lunica, apart from Reinhard and a select few others. Yet here was Wood, a young man with such formidable strength and skill, whom Wilhelm had never even heard of. "I am Wilhelm van Astrie. Thank you for helping us defeat the Mist Beast. May I ask for your name?" The old swordsman landed before Wood, offering a small bow as a show of utmost respect. Regardless of Wood's origins or age, his strength and his role in defeating the white whale made him worthy of Wilhelm's gratitude. "I am Wood Hoxson. There's no need for thanks. I didn't come here to hunt the Mist Beast or the Sin Archbishop. I came because I was worried about my sister. Helping you was just a coincidence." Unaware of Wilhelm's personal grudge against the white whale, Wood was puzzled by the gratitude and had no time to chat with Wilhelm. "The witch's cult officer over there. Don't you think it's a bit late to be trying to escape?" The original white whale had been sent flying with a kick, its clone had been sliced to pieces, and the mist had been completely dispersed. There was no way Sloth dared stay any longer. He had thought Wood only possessed incredible physical strength and swordsmanship, but the wind magic that dispersed the mist proved otherwise. Wood, whom Sloth had already deemed a monster, turned out to be even more monstrous than he had imagined. A real beast. Wood not only had unparalleled physical strength and swordsmanship but also wielded inhuman levels of magical power. Sloth himself was a spirit dwelling in a human body, and spirits were naturally more gifted with magic compared to humans. But when Wood unleashed that wind spell, Sloth realized what true insanity was. Seeing Wood focus on him again, Sloth lost his nerve entirely and turned to flee. In his escape, Sloth used another of his abilities. Sloth's fingers. This ability allowed him to forcibly contract others by injecting them with his sloth factor, gaining control over those who were highly compatible. Those affected by the sloth factor became his fingers, capable of wielding the invisible hand authority. However, the power and number of hands the fingers could wield were nothing compared to Sloth himself. Sloth wasn't hoping the fingers could defeat Wood, he just needed them to buy him time. The witch's cult members accompanying Sloth had been carefully chosen, all highly compatible with the sloth factor. Under its influence, they quickly became fingers, and, losing all reason under mental pollution, they charged madly at Wood. Sloth could control up to 10 fingers, and now he pushed his power to the limit. 10 cultists threw off their cloaks, revealing expressions of the same deranged madness as Sloth, as they used the invisible hand against Wood. "So, this is the mighty Sin Archbishop. The same old trick, over and over again. Quantity alone won't bring about a qualitative change. 100 Ghosts Sword style. Mist Phantom." The 10 cultists turned fingers all attacked Wood with their invisible hands. However, to their surprise, each of the purple, witch-imbued hands passed through empty air, as Wood's body dispersed like mist. When Wood reformed, appearing behind the fingers, the sound of a sword being sheathed echoed. All 10 fingers were instantly covered in deep slashes, blood gushing like fountains. The 10 fingers had bought Sloth only a few seconds before they were mercilessly slain. Just as Sloth finished preparing a teleportation spell, injecting his mana, a hand grasped his neck like a lightning strike, and the magic circle beneath him was stomped to pieces by Wood. "I've heard the witch's cult holds grudges. Especially lunatics like you. To prevent you from targeting me or those close to me, I'm afraid you'll need to die right here. Holy attribute magic, divine purification. Sloth struggled violently, dangling by the neck in Wood's grasp, but when a massive pillar of light rose beneath them, his strength quickly faded. Under the pure, sacred power of the holy attribute, chunks of dark matter began to fall from Sloth's body, burning away into nothing under the divine light. A beam of golden light broke through the clouds above, and a female spirit descended gracefully from the sky like an ethereal being. The moment Sloth saw her, his once crazed expression softened, his eyes regaining clarity. "I'm sorry, Fortuna." Tears streamed down Sloth's face. "No, rather, the spirit named Juice." And the female spirit said nothing, only extending her hands to gently touch his face. As they embraced and slowly dissolved into golden motes within the holy light, Sloth looked toward Wood and spoke. "Thank you for freeing me. Please, take care of Amelia for us. Lastly, beware the Witch of Vanity. Pandora." With those words, the Sin Archbishop of Sloth vanished completely. Under Wood's divine purification spell, Sloth was finally freed from the influence of the witch factor and mental pollution, regaining his sanity at the end. Unfortunately, his magic and spirit had been too tainted for too long. The purification process caused immense damage. Though Sloth regained his clarity at the last moment, he wasn't able to leave much useful information before fading away into light. Chapter 369, Wood, how dare you go against your sister? As the radiant golden light that enveloped the Sin Archbishop of Sloth faded away in Wood's grasp, everyone present was left in awe, unable to hide their disbelief. The magic Wood had used was unlike anything they had ever seen before. Light and dark elemental spells were rare, and only a handful of individuals could even wield them. However, for someone to wield light magic at such an advanced level was beyond their comprehension. The target had been none other than an archbishop of the witch cult. A criminal of considerable weight, feared in many nearby kingdoms, and possessing immense power. Yet here and now, such a menace, roaming free for years, had been vanquished by a single spell from Wood. The womanly figure that had appeared in the final flash of holy light also did not go unnoticed. Initially, many thought it was an angel, but later, they realized that the figure was actually a female spirit. And she seemed to know the Sin Archbishop of Sloth personally. "Wood, tell me, what is the meaning of that caravan over there?" The sudden question rang out, drawing all eyes toward its source. "Didn't you once tell me you had no interest in merchants at all? So why now, are you helping that half-elf build a trading caravan?" The voice belonged to Anastasia Hoshin, Wood's sister, who strode up with a fiercely determined expression. "You know full well that half-elf is also my competitor in the royal selection. The one advantage we have is the Hoshin Trading Company's economic power." After a spectacular performance in subduing both the White Whale and the Archbishop of Sloth, Wood's presence was imposing. No one dared to approach him, save for one person. Anastasia. She approached without fear, grabbing Wood by the ear as if scolding a disobedient child. The young woman was none other than Wood's sister from the slums. Anastasia Hoshin, with whom he had grown up. The moment Subaru and the rest showed up, Wood knew things could get tricky. He had wanted to slip away quietly, but Anastasia had anticipated his every move. Before he could escape, she had ordered Mimi and her brothers to stop him. "Dear sister, I don't understand what you're talking about." Wood tried to play dumb, his usual tactic. "It's true Amelia wanted to create a trading caravan, but it was all Subaru's idea. He's the one managing it. I'm just an outsider helping from time to time." From the memories he retained, Anastasia was like family. Someone who seemed impossibly close, with shared experiences that felt genuine, as if they were truly his own. When it came to his strong-willed sister, Wood seemed to hold a natural fear. Something embedded deep within him. "Cut the nonsense, Wood. Venomous Thorn and the others practically cowered the moment they heard your name." Anastasia continued, clearly not buying his excuse. "It's obvious they were protecting Amelia's caravan because of you. Don't lie to me. And now, my dear brother is working for another faction. And against his sister." Wood shot a glance towards Venomous Thorn and the others, who all shrank under his gaze until, at last, he sighed and admitted. "Fine, it's true. Venomous Thorn and his men acted under my orders, but there was no intention of targeting you, sister. I merely wanted to reform the assassin group. If you have any doubts, we can merge Subaru's caravan with the Hoshin Raiding Company. Work together." Wood's original idea had been to expand his control over the assassin group, use the financial backing from the caravan to strengthen their influence, and infiltrate neighboring kingdoms. But after the incident with the White Whale and Sloth, his plans had been foiled. There was no longer any use for gradual development. Better to capitalize on his sister's existing business. Absolutely not. Anastasia was having none of it. "Anyone else is fine, but not that half-elf." Does she really think she can use a trading caravan to snatch away my advantage? She can hand you back over first. Julius, standing nearby, was initially delighted at Wood's suggestion. But before he could say a word, Anastasia had already rejected it. Not only that, she insisted that Wood come back home with her. Sister. Wood pleaded, trying to reason with her. I've told you over and over again, I am not your personal belonging. You can't lay claim to everything. You were never this prejudiced against demi-humans, so why now are you calling her a half-elf? Wood tried to persuade his sister to calm down, but Anastasia would not listen. She clung to him tightly, refusing to let go. To ensure Wood didn't flee, she even ordered the cat siblings to help, but Hetaro and Tiv, feeling they were mature men, refused to engage in something so embarrassing. Mimi, on the other hand, had no such qualms and leaped forward to grab Wood's head in a bear hug. Since Anastasia-sama isn't interested in an alliance, I, Cross, would be more than willing to collaborate with Amelia's faction. The unexpected offer came as a graceful voice cut through the sibling argument. Cross, having finally regrouped with her retainers, approached alongside Felix and Wilhelm. Among the 5 royal candidates, Cross was considered a frontrunner, and until now, she had been confident in her chances of winning the crown. But after this expedition, her confidence was shaken. The source of that uncertainty stood right in front of her. Wood Hoshin, Amelia's knight. Among the 5 candidates, Amelia had always seemed the weakest. No one had taken her seriously. But now, Cross saw that the weakest faction was anything but frail. Wood Hoshin's prowess was on par with the sword saint, Reinhard. And his ability to absorb an assassin group into his faction indicated he was not only powerful but also tactically adept. Even Subaru, who often appeared lackluster, had unique strengths. In their earlier interactions, Cross recognized his talent for negotiation and strategic thinking. Moreover, when everyone else had been helpless against Sloth's power of the invisible hands, Subaru had been the only one who could see them. It spoke to a special ability. Something Cross valued. If Reinhard was going to be an inevitable obstacle in the final stages of the royal selection, Cross needed a powerful ally, and no ally seemed stronger right now than Wood. His name is Wood Hoshin, and he is my brother. If anyone wants an alliance, it's going to be with me, not with others. Anastasia, clearly frustrated that even Cross was making a move on her brother, quickly pulled Wood behind her, shielding him like a mother hen guarding her chicks. Anastasia-sama. Cross responded coolly. You may be his sister, but unless I'm mistaken, Wood serves as Amelia's knight now. I'm interested in working with Amelia's faction, not with you, Anastasia. So your permission is not needed. To Cross, Anastasia was little more than a rival, and she had never particularly liked her. Growing up with strict knightly ideals, Cross found Anastasia's overly mercantile nature off-putting. Adding to that, they were both contenders for the throne, and it was no surprise they often butted heads. Ultimately, it was Wilhelm who had claimed the final strike against the incapacitated white whale. A privilege granted after he pleaded to Wood for that honor. It was his way of avenging his late wife, and it left the old swordsman feeling fulfilled. By all rights, Wilhelm should have pledged his loyalty to Wood for helping him achieve this goal. However, Cross's role in this hunt made him feel indebted to her as well. Sir Wilhelm, there's no need to feel guilty. Wood said, noticing the tension. I wasn't here specifically for the white whale. If my sister's okay, then it wasn't a wasted trip. Besides, without your efforts to hold back the 2 whale clones, I doubt my sister would have made it until I arrived. With the deaths of both the white whale and a Sin Archbishop of Sloth, Anastasia and Cross began tallying up their losses and organizing their remaining forces. Of the 3 factions participating in the white whale subjugation, Anastasia's had borne the brunt of the casualties. The Hoshin Trading Company caravan had been the first to encounter the white whale. Despite their rapid response, and even sending word for reinforcements, the merchants caught in the initial fog had all disappeared, and over half their cargo was lost. Although Cross's knights had also sustained injuries and fatalities, Anastasia's hired mercenary suffered greater losses. Ironically, it was Subaru's group, the one drawn into the battle inadvertently, that seemed to come out of it in the best shape. Since Wood had arrived almost immediately after they were engulfed in the fog, they had retained most of their cargo. Additionally, Wood had played a pivotal role in defeating both the Sin Archbishop and the White Whale, meaning their faction now held considerable merit in the eyes of the others. This was a fact Subaru was eager to assert. The rewards from defeating the White Whale and the Archbishop could significantly bolster Amelia's standing in the royal selection. Both threats had been long-standing dangers to Lunica, and whoever claimed their defeat would gain a massive advantage. Subaru saw this as a chance to change Amelia's reputation for the better. An opportunity to prove that she was not the same as the Witch of Envy, Satella. In contrast, Anastasia was insistent that since the information regarding the White Whale's whereabouts came from her, and because Wood had shown up for her sake, The majority of the credits should go to her. Meanwhile, Subaru's claim was that since Wood was officially Amelia's knight, all credit naturally belonged to Amelia's faction. While Cross observed both Anastasia and Subaru argue over who deserved the larger share of the glory, she herself was not willing to let the matter slide either. Cross's forces had sustained significant losses in this fight, and she had made prior agreements with Julius that guaranteed her a significant share of the spoils. The three factions bickered, none of them willing to give an inch, until Rem and Amelia arrived on a dragon carriage in a frantic rush. They had an urgent message for Wood and Subaru. Roswell's domain, particularly the village of Arlem where Mealy had once stayed, had come under attack by the witch cult. Chapter 370, Solving the Problem by Getting Rid of Natsuki Subaru. The information had come from Frederica, Roswell's head maid. She was a mature demi-human with golden hair. Frederica had previously served as a maid at the Roswell mansion. However, with both Ram and Rem heading to the royal capital during the royal selection, Frederica had returned to manage the household in their absence. According to Frederica, the ones responsible for the attack on Arlem village were two other Sin archbishops of the witch cult. Batenka Ichos Lay, the Archbishop of Gluttony, and Regulus Corneas, the Archbishop of Greed. During their assault on Arlem village, they had crossed paths with Ram, who had been secretly trailing Roswell back to the mansion, resulting in a fierce battle. Ram's power had fully returned, earning her the title on a god without horns. She had fought valiantly. However, while trying to protect the villagers and facing an overwhelmingly powerful opponent, Ram had ultimately fallen, losing her memory for reasons unknown. Thankfully, just as Gluttony and Greed were about to finish Ram off, Roswell had intervened, forcing the two archbishops to temporarily retreat. To prevent the villagers of Arlem from being targeted again, Roswell had led them into a place known as the Sanctuary. The sanctuary was fully named Cremaldi's Sanctuary. The sanctuary was protected by the labyrinthine forest barrier, which disoriented intruders and prevented mixed-blooded individuals from entering, causing them to lose consciousness, while pure-blooded humans were unaffected. The sanctuary had originally been an experimental site created by the Witch of Greed and served as her final resting place. The land had always been managed by the Mathers family, hence under Roswell's jurisdiction. Due to the sanctuary's barrier, mixed-blooded demi-humans were either unable to enter or could not leave once inside. Frederica herself had originated from the sanctuary and was able to leave only due to the shining stone Roswell had provided her. Once Roswell brought the villagers into the sanctuary for refuge, they had essentially ended up as hostages. Garfield Tinsel, one of the demi-humans leading the inhabitants, used the lives of the human villagers as leverage, demanding that Amelia undergo a trial to release the sanctuary. The sanctuary's barrier was not absolute. It could be lifted by completing a series of 3 trials. It was clear that since Roswell had taken the villagers there, they had now become prisoners. Amelia, true to her kind nature, had no intention of abandoning innocent villagers and had planned to go alone. Fortunately, Rem persuaded her to consult Wood and Subaru first. With news of the witch cult's attack by Gluttony and Greed, Ram's injury and memory loss, and mention of new figures like Garfield Tinsel and Frederica, a massive wave of names and information hit Wood. All he could think of now was to echo "My brain is trembling." Like Sloth. With their home in danger, neither Wood nor Subaru had time to argue over credit for the defeat of Sloth and the White Whale. They swiftly left for Roswell's mansion. Where's Ram now? If her full strength had returned, why couldn't she fend off the witch cult's attack on Arlem village? Are these Sin archbishops really that strong? Wood asked. From what he had seen of Sloth, his power had been formidable enough to be ranked among the strongest individuals Wood had encountered so far. Still, Wood had expected that Ram, at her peak, would have been capable of handling someone like him. What concerned Wood more was the fact that Ram had lost her memory. If there was a way to help her recover her memories, they might be able to gather valuable information from her. Big Sister is at Roswell's mansion, but she doesn't even remember me anymore. We've even had Lady Beatrice look her over, and she said there was nothing she could do. Rem replied in a downcast tone. Wood realized that something serious must have happened to Ram. After all, if she had forgotten her beloved sister Ram, it was unlikely she remembered anything else. Upon returning to Roswell's mansion at full speed, they found a tall, blonde maid giving orders to 2 shorter maids. Seeing one of the small pink-haired maids deftly performing household chores, Subaru almost dropped his jaw in shock. As someone who had stayed in the mansion, Subaru knew about the twin Nana sisters. Ram was always known as an all-purpose maid, while her sister Ram was utterly inept at domestic chores. Her only talent being her sharp tongue? Yet here was the very same Ram, flawlessly handling household duties, and even rivaling Ram in efficiency. Based on this, Subaru had no doubt. Ram had indeed lost her memory. To help Ram recover, Wood decided to conduct an examination. Strangely enough, There were no signs of injury or lingering magical effects on her body. Even after using high-level healing magic under Ram's hopeful gaze, it yielded no results. As Beatrice said, Ram wasn't injured. Rather, her memories were taken or devoured. I believe the Sin Archbishop did something to her, given that she still carries a remnant of the witch's scent, and her soul is damaged," said Puck, who had emerged from behind Amelia. As the most powerful fire spirit, Puck possessed considerable insight, and after listening to Beatrice's earlier assessment, he had already deduced Ram's condition. So Ram's injuries or influence stem from her very soul? Wood frowned deeply. While healing soul-level injuries wasn't impossible, Wood himself didn't have the means to do so. Healing something of that magnitude would require a divine level of magic. Even with the power of the Heart of God, the highest Wood could manage was Imperial level. If Beatrice says this, she's likely correct. And if even she's helpless, then the only way for Ram to recover is to defeat the Sin Archbishop responsible. Puck continued. His words left everyone silent. Whether or not they could defeat an enigmatic and formidable Sin Archbishop, their current challenge was even finding the person. The witch cult's Sin Archbishops had evaded capture for years, not only due to their formidable strength but also because of their elusive behavior. In fact, there is another option besides defeating the Archbishop who targeted Ram, Wood said, suddenly glancing at Subaru beside him. Subaru was no fool. Seeing Wood's gaze, a sinking feeling settled in his stomach. Before he could attempt to slip away, Wood had already grabbed him by the back of his collar. "I need to have a word with Natsuki Subaru. We'll be back soon," Wood said before disappearing into the mansion's courtyard with Subaru. "You don't even need to say it, I know what you're thinking," Subaru blurted out as soon as they were alone. "You want to use my ability to reset time to before Ram got attacked. But do you even consider my feelings? My ability triggers through death. Do you really expect me to die just for the chance to help Ram remember? It's too much." Subaru slumped onto the ground, refusing to cooperate. Sure, he had a power that ensured he wouldn't truly die, but that didn't mean he enjoyed dying. "Stop whining already. Are you doing it yourself, or do I need to help you? You won't actually die anyway. What's the point of having a power like that if you don't use it?" Wood snapped. "Plus, isn't your goal to help Amelia win the royal selection? Ram could hold vital information that helps us." As much as he wanted to slice Subaru with his sword and be done with it, Wood had to restrain himself. He was an unknown entity in this world, and if Subaru truly died, he feared that his ability might not activate. Thus, he decided to try persuading Subaru instead. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one dying. I always end up dying, and no one even knows what I've gone through for them. It's so unfair." Subaru's frustration finally burst out. Being an unsung hero might have its charm, but that role certainly didn't suit Subaru. After all, what did he want most from being in another world? Winning the hearts of the otherworldly girls. The unsung hero who silently protected everyone was never going to get the girls' favor. Because none of them even knew what he had done. "Oh, so that's what's bothering you?" Wood paused, and a sly smile crossed his face. "How about this? If you use your power to reset the timeline for Ram, I'll make sure Venomous Thorn and the others spread stories of your heroics during the White Whale subjugation. I'll even make sure Amelia hears about your bravery. Deal?" Subaru agreed almost instantly, jumping up from the ground and shaking Wood's hand in excitement. It was clear that Subaru had played him. Even if Wood hadn't made that offer, Subaru would likely have relented in the end. Still, Wood decided it was better this way. Subaru's power was invaluable, and rewarding him with some recognition would make it easier to rely on him in the future. "You always go overboard when you do things. Sure, I have to die, but I'd rather not make it more painful than necessary. I'll do it myself," Subaru declared when he saw Wood draw his sword, offering to assist. Subaru had witnessed Wood's battles firsthand. He knew exactly how powerful the monster before him was. On one hand, he feared that if Wood hit too hard, he'd turn into paste. Would he still be able to revive from that? On the other, Subaru simply didn't want the pain. If he had to die, he preferred a less painful method. "I can return by death." As Subaru uttered the words, he could feel a slender hand clutching his heart. Despite the overwhelming discomfort, he forced himself to say his ability's name out loud. And as he did, the unseen hand crushed his heart. Wood sensed a powerful presence surrounding Subaru as he spoke the words "return by death." It was incredibly strong. Enough to make even Wood feel threatened. It was the second time Wood had experienced such a sensation since coming to this world. The first being his encounter with the Sword Saint, Reinhard. Before he could observe the powerful or more closely, a familiar dizziness overwhelmed him, and he blacked out. When Wood opened his eyes again, the scenery had changed. He was now on a rural road. presumably on the way to the white whale subjugation. This meant that Subaru's checkpoint was set before they confronted the white whale. After a brief moment of consideration, Wood made up his mind to change his plan. Instead of rushing to Anastasia's aid, he would head straight for Arlem village. If he followed the original timeline, nothing would change, and Subaru's sacrifice would be in vain. The village was far from his current position, but if Wood ignored the magic and stamina consumption, he could make it there within half a day. With time running out, Wood used wind magic for acceleration, while employing instant transmission for faster travel. However, just as he neared the border of Roswell's domain, the familiar dizziness returned, clouding his mind. Subaru must have died again. Considering Subaru knew that Wood was on his way to provide backup, it was unlikely he had taken his own life. It was more probable that the white whale or sloth had killed him instead. Chapter 371, Sin Archbishops of Gluttony and Greed. On the vast, open plains, Natsuki Subaru lay on the ground, his body torn in half. His consciousness gradually blurred. Just as Wood had anticipated, Subaru had indeed perished, and it was by the hands of the Sin Archbishop of Sloth. Originally, the target of Sloth's invisible hand was not Subaru but rather Anastasia Hushin. Subaru, however, threw himself in harm's way to shield Anastasia, ending up torn in two. Truth be told, Subaru had no particular relationship with Anastasia. Though she was undoubtedly a beauty, Subaru wasn't so reckless as to sacrifice his life for her. However, the circumstances left him no choice. He knew Anastasia was Wood's sister. Despite Wood's usual behavior of acting like he disliked her, Subaru knew how much she meant to him. Otherwise, Wood wouldn't have rushed all the way to save her just because of a letter from Mimi. Subaru's ability was returned by death. When the timeline reset, those who had died before him would come back to life. However, this save point was uncontrollable, making it dangerous for anyone who died before him. If Anastasia died and Subaru followed afterward, the save point might end up after her death but before his. No matter how many times Subaru reset the timeline, Anastasia would never come back. To prevent this, knowing full well how Wood might react if Anastasia were gone forever, Subaru hesitated only briefly before taking the hit for her. Thanks to Subaru's return by death, Wood found himself back at the starting point once more. He scanned the familiar surroundings, a look of exasperation on his face. Subaru dying wasn't exactly surprising to Wood. He knew well the strength of the white whale and the Sin Archbishop of Sloth. Wilhelm was tied up by two of the white whale's clones, while the real white whale and sloth lurked in the thick mist, hunting everyone down. Natsuki Subaru, if you're a real man, just hang in there longer next time, Wood muttered, though his steps were swift as ever. To prevent another early reset, he pushed himself to the limit, speeding toward the site. Evidently, Subaru was tougher after his first death. Now understanding the strength of the white whale and sloth, he directed Venomous Thorn and the others, buying enough time for Wood to arrive. Despite their best efforts, however, Subaru and his group eventually fell. Yet, this time, they held out until Wood reached Arlem village. In this new timeline, Wood arrived just in time to see Ram fighting against two of the witch cult's Sin Archbishops. Gluttony and Greed. Gluttony, Lebetenka Itos, was a short, scruffy boy with knee-length, brown, tangled hair. He wore ragged clothes, and his exposed limbs were dirty. He wielded a dagger. Greed, Regulus Corneas, appeared more refined, dressed in a priest-like white robe with golden embroidery. However, his exaggerated expressions made him look just as manic as Sloth. When Wood reached Arlem village, Ram was sent flying by Greed's power. At the same time, Gluttony appeared behind her, ready to strike with his dagger. Only for Wood to send him flying with a single kick. Seeing Wood's sudden arrival, Ram's face brightened with joy. She opened her mouth to speak, but that familiar dizziness struck Wood yet again. Damn it, just another 10 minutes. No, even 5 more minutes, and I could have gotten useful information from Ram. Wood's anger and frustration made no difference to the relentless passage of time. When he came to his senses, he was once again standing in the middle of the road. This is turning into an endless loop. Whether it's Subaru dealing with the white whale and sloth or Ram facing off against Gluttony and Greed, neither side can catch a break. Even if I manage to prevent Ram from losing her memory, Subaru dying will just reset everything. Each time Subaru returned by death, they managed to gather more information, extending their survival time. But once Wood finished handling the situation at Arlem village and hurried to assist Subaru, it was already too late. Under the current circumstances, without additional support or intervention, they had 3 options to break the cycle. The first option was for Wood to head straight to the white whale's location, eliminate both the white whale and sloth swiftly, ensure Subaru's survival, and then rush to Arlem village. The second option was to stick to the current plan, but either Wood had to move even faster, or Subaru had to hold out longer. This way, Wood could get some information from Ram. Even though the timeline would still reset due to Subaru's death, Wood's unique existence allowed him to retain the information he obtained from Ram. After gathering the intel, Wood could then proceed to where the white whale was and deal with it, along with Sloth. Though the outcome would mirror the original events, Ram would still lose her memory. The only difference would be that Wood had some vital information before her memory loss. As for the third option, Wood had little hope. For Subaru and the others to somehow defeat the white whale and Sloth on their own. Subaru not using return by death would give Wood the time he needed to handle gluttony and greed. It would be the ideal outcome. Wood quickly dismissed the first option. From what he had seen during the previous loop, by the time he reached Harlem Village, Ram was already at a disadvantage. Even if he hurried and dealt with the white whale and Sloth, it would still be too late to save her. The third option, though promising, depended entirely on Subaru and his allies' capabilities, making Wood's efforts irrelevant. After some hesitation, Wood reluctantly concluded that the only viable course of action was to head straight for Harlem Village again. Having traveled the same route 3 times now, Wood avoided unnecessary detours and shortcuts, arriving even earlier at Harlem Village compared to the previous loops. This time, as Wood arrived, Ram was releasing an incredible surge of magic, the horn on her head radiating visible wind magic energy. With just a swing of her arm, the magic channeled through her horn became a violent gale, and in the next instant, she unleashed numerous wind blades toward gluttony and greed. The wind magic that Ram released was on par with Wood's saint-level wind magic. The hardened rocky terrain was gouged deeply by the cutting wind blades. Houses in Harlem Village creaked under the strain of the gale, and smaller stones and trees were swept into the air. Ram had recovered her power as a member of the Honor race, surpassing even Julius, the finest knight. Would even believe that if Ram faced the white whale one-on-one, she would have a considerable chance of victory. The sheer scale of her wind magic was enough to blow away the white whale's fog in an instant. But then, something happened that caught Wood by surprise. As Ram's powerful wind magic reached greed, he simply extended his hand and stopped it. Stopped wasn't entirely accurate, as there was no clash of power against power. Wind, by nature, was fluid, yet the wind blades aimed at greed seemed frozen in place. With a gesture, the massive wind blades shattered before Greed, who remained unscathed, his sleeves not even ruffled. At the same time, Gluttony, who had been standing behind Greed, suddenly seemed to teleport behind Ram. Without warning, he raised his dagger, ready to strike at her chest. Allowing Gluttony to succeed was not an option. Wood immediately activated instant transmission. Disappearing and reappearing in front of Ram, slashing at Gluttony before the latter could strike. Despite his hunched appearance and ragged clothing, Gluttony displayed keen reflexes and agility, swiftly changing his dagger's trajectory to block Wood's sword. Clang! The sound of metal clashing reverberated. Though Gluttony managed to block the strike, he couldn't match Wood's strength and was sent flying. The small figure skidded along the ground, and as both Gluttony and Greed looked at Wood, curiosity lit up their faces. Ram, meanwhile, was visibly relieved to see Wood. She was both surprised and happy at his sudden arrival. Compared to Ram is clearly lacking in the chest department. And yet you still choose to stab her there? That's not going to make her happy. Wood teased, his tone light-hearted. Ram, who had been touched by her rescue, immediately lost her sentiment and huffed in annoyance. Can you be serious for once, Sir Wood? Don't act like that fool Barasu. These two are Sin archbishops of the witch cult. They're extremely dangerous. Seeing Wood had certainly put Ram more at ease, as she knew his strength was beyond measure, but the opponent was still an archbishop. Caution was necessary. What happened here in Harlem Village? Weren't you supposed to be tracking Roswell? Why are you suddenly fighting the witch cult here? And not just one, but 2 archbishops? With time being limited, Wood wasted no time questioning Ram, knowing Subaru could end up dying again at any moment. I was investigating Lord Roswell, and I found out that the witch cult's frequent activities were all because of Lady Amelia's participation in the royal selection. Moreover, Lord Roswell knew about it the entire time. Ram continued. Just as I was digging deeper, I encountered Gluttony and Greed here. They planned to capture the villagers to lure Lady Amelia. Lord Roswell arrived briefly but left to take the villagers to safety, leaving me to hold off the witch cult. Ram remained somewhat loyal to Roswell, as she hadn't found conclusive evidence linking him to Ram's injuries. Given the past debt she owed him and knowing the villagers would be in danger if they fell into the witch cult's hands, Ram had agreed to hold the line. The job wasn't necessarily a death sentence, and with her restored Honor power, Ram was confident in her abilities. But she hadn't expected these Sin archbishops to be so formidable. Judging by their initial clash, retreating unscathed seemed increasingly unlikely. Hearing Ram's explanation, Wood hesitated. It didn't match the information he'd gathered from his previous loops. Hadn't Frederica said that Roswell scared off gluttony and greed by arriving in time? Yet now Ram was claiming Roswell had taken the villagers away, leaving her behind to fight. Had the timeline changed because of the loop, or had Frederica and Roswell lied? What about the abilities of these two archbishops? What are they capable of? Time was running out. Wood needed to understand greed and gluttony's abilities as soon as possible, so they could plan accordingly if the timeline reset and Ram lost her memory again. I don't know. Ram admitted. It's my first time facing off against the sin archbishops of greed and gluttony. I barely know anything about their abilities. Chapter 372, The Invincible Archbishop of Greed? Hearing Ram's serious tone, Wood's expression turned grim. If even Ram had no information on the abilities of gluttony and greed, then it was up to him to find out. He could only hope that Subaru would last a bit longer, giving him the chance to gather more details about the two archbishops. Having fought Sloth before, Wood knew that the witch cults and archbishops all possessed powers called authorities. These powers were not magic, nor were they attributed to any element, but they were immensely powerful. While it might have seemed easy for Wood to defeat Sloth, that was only because he had been a direct counter to him. The so-called invisible hands were rendered ineffective against Natsuki Subaru, who could see them, and against Wood's heightened senses and mastery of observation hockey. But that didn't mean Sloth, as a sin archbishop, was weak. Let's not forget that before Wood had arrived, Sloth had single-handedly held off Julius, Wilhelm, Venomous Thorn, and Cross. From his brief observations, Wood had gathered that greed seemed to possess some kind of magic nullification or possibly a time manipulation ability. As for gluttony, it might have something to do with the teleportation he had used just moments ago. Of course, whether the powers displayed by greed and gluttony were their authorities or simply their own abilities was yet to be determined. Much like Sloth, who was an earth spirit and used powerful earth magic, Wood wasn't naive enough to assume that greed and gluttony only relied on their authorities. From what had been displayed so far, it seemed clear that greed was the more troublesome of the two. Though teleportation was a nuisance, with Wood's observation hockey for predicting attacks and armament hockey for defense, gluttony wouldn't easily be able to find an opening to strike. In contrast, greed's ability was far trickier. To test whether greed's power was advanced magic immunity or related to time and space, Wood launched an Emperor-level water spell in his direction. With Wood's current magic power, the spell's impact was nothing short of devastating. A massive blue magic circle appeared in the sky, drawing dark clouds together at visible speed, making the air thick with humidity. Before greed and gluttony could react to the sudden changes above Arlem village, massive waterspouts shot down from the swirling clouds. The waterspouts fell from the sky like columns of water, similar to dragon tails formed during ocean storms, except in reverse. Crashing downward with enough force to obliterate the earth. Even a simple droplet of water could carve stone. Now, a torrent of raging water tore through the ground, making even solid bedrock crack under its might. Upon seeing the destructive power of the descending waterspouts, Gluttony wasted no time teleporting out of danger. Wood didn't care that Gluttony had fled. He had already anticipated that someone with teleportation wouldn't be caught so easily. The main target had always been the white-haired boy, Greed. The waterspouts converged, surrounding Greed from all sides under Wood's command. Despite facing such overwhelming force, the boy maintained a calm demeanor, even gazing mockingly at Wood. The multiple waterspouts combined into one giant torrent as they crashed down upon Greed. For a moment, Ram believed the threat had been eradicated by Wood's overwhelming attack, but to her disbelief, Greed walked out of the cascading water completely unharmed. Not only was he unscathed, but he adjusted his collar nonchalantly, even patting off imaginary dust in a mocking gesture. Impossible. A spell of that magnitude. Even a great spirit of water wouldn't come out of that unscathed. Ram exclaimed, her eyes wide in shock. It was as if the sight before her defied her very understanding of power. Ram had never considered herself among the world's strongest, even if she was called the hornless demon god within her clan. Among those she knew, Roswell and Wood were undoubtedly more powerful. And after witnessing Wood unleash the magic of God's heart, Ram had thought Wood might be the strongest in the world. Surely even the sword Saint Reinhard or the Witch of Envy Satella would struggle against such overwhelming might. But now, the man she believed to be the strongest had failed to leave so much as a scratch on Greed. Yes, the Sin archbishops were powerful, but this went beyond normal strength. If they were truly this formidable, then the witch cult, with its 7 archbishops, would have long since conquered the world instead of hiding in the shadows. It's not impossible. I am the witch cult's greatest weapon, the strongest existence aside from the witch herself. Greed spoke arrogantly. There is nothing I desire. There is no greed in me, only devotion. My sole wish is the resurrection of the witch. Greed, the white-haired boy, was an insufferable chatterbox. Wood and Ram had hoped to gain some useful information from his boasting, but after a few minutes, they realized he was merely self-absorbed, providing no meaningful insights. Whether it was Ram's wind magic or my water magic, neither had any effect on you, Wood said, his eyes narrowing as he observed Greed. In the moment my magic touched you, the wind stopped moving, and the water ceased to flow. It wasn't that you nullified the magic. You stopped it. So, your ability must be temporal or spatial, rather than simply magic resistance. Greed's magical energy wasn't particularly strong, and Wood could tell that he lacked an especially durable body. Thus, only a few possibilities remained. Before Greed could respond, Wood had already closed the distance between them. With a swift use of instant transmission, one of the 6 powers, he was in front of Greed within an instant, his sword slicing downward at the Archbishop's head. The pressure from his strike raised a gust of wind, creating a dust cloud that obscured both of them from view. Ram watched anxiously as the dust began to settle, only to see Greed get knocked backward, his figure barely visible through the haze. Before she could celebrate the apparent victory, Ram's keen demon senses picked up a familiar scent. The stench of a witch. She quickly moved aside, narrowly avoiding an ambush as Gluttony reappeared, trying to strike her again. Gluttony had called her name as he attacked, but fortunately, Ram's heightened senses allowed her to avoid his strike. She retaliated with a surge of wind, sending Gluttony crashing into a nearby tree. Wood returned to Ram's side after driving Greed back, his face more serious than before. While Ram looked relieved, Wood's expression remained tense. It seems Greed's ability isn't a form of magic nullification. It's as I suspected. It's a troublesome temporal or spatial power. Wood explained. Not just magic, but even my physical attacks had no effect. No. In that moment, my attack lost control and seemed to stop in time. Ram was puzzled. But I saw you knock him back, Wood. Doesn't that mean physical attacks have some effect on him? That was just collateral damage. My strike damaged the ground beneath him, causing him to be thrown back. If you look closely, you'll see he wasn't actually harmed at all. Wood replied. If his power indeed causes temporal stasis, then he can render our attacks meaningless. If that ability extends to himself. Exactly. Greed interrupted with a self-satisfied grin. The authority of the lion's heart, when applied to myself, makes me invincible. I am untouchable, be it by physical or magical means. Fire, water, ice, earth. Nothing can harm me. Even my clothes remain unscathed. Wood was unsurprised by the revelation. Greed was no longer hiding his abilities, now he was flaunting them, clearly intending to instill hopelessness. Ignoring Greed's boasting, Wood shifted his attention to Gluttony, who had just reappeared at Greed's side after being thrown into the tree. As the Archbishop of Gluttony, you must possess some ability that causes memory loss. Wood said. Considering you called out Ram's name during both of your attacks, it means there are certain conditions that must be met for it to work. Is stating the target's name part of it? What other requirements are there? Care to enlighten youths like your chatty friend here? Hearing Wood's deductions, both Greed and Gluttony looked genuinely surprised. Among the witch cult, Sloth and Greed were the most frequently seen archbishops. However, unlike Sloth, Greed often acted covertly, making him less known to the outside world. Let alone the abilities of the other archbishops. Gluttony had yet to use his memory-devouring power on Ram, and yet Wood had already deduced its existence. He had also figured out that calling the victim's name was a necessary condition. The fact that he had came to these conclusions purely from observing Gluttony's attacks was almost beyond belief. Such wisdom. Such insight. This night must be delicious. Gluttony shouted, his eyes gleaming with manic excitement. Feast. Indulge. The hunger of our hearts, our stomachs. I shall dine on you. In an instant, Gluttony teleported in front of Wood, launching an attack. At the same time, Greed joined in, picking up the rock from the ground and tossing it towards Wood, as if it were all a game. Both archbishops had abandoned Ram as their target, focusing entirely on Wood. It was a logical choice. Wood's abilities made him a formidable adversary, but his intelligence and analytical skills made him an even bigger threat. In a short time, Wood had managed to deduce much of their abilities. If they allowed him to continue, their authorities, their trump cards, would be fully exposed, leaving them at a severe disadvantage. To avoid that outcome, they had to eliminate Wood. The dangerous night. At all costs. Chapter 373, Wood, there is no such thing as an invincible power. The Sin Archbishop of Gluttony had the power of instantaneous movement. As soon as his figure disappeared, he reappeared in front of Wood in the blink of an eye. Just like when he attacked Ram, the Gluttony Archbishop called out Wood's name as he launched his assault. He learned Wood's name after hearing Ram call it several times during the fight. It wasn't just Wood's side that was gathering intelligence in the middle of combat, the Archbishops of Gluttony and Greed were doing the same. Since Gluttony had tried repeatedly to get close to Ram, Wood didn't know all the conditions needed for Gluttony to activate his authority. Still, he chose to keep his distance and counter with magic. The moment Wood dodged Gluttony's attack, the stone that Greed had thrown was already hurtling towards him. Though it was just an ordinary rock from the side of the road, Wood instinctively felt its danger. Without hesitation, he swung his long sword, and the clash between the rock and his sword echoed with a metallic clang in the air. But then something unexpected happened, even to Wood. Though not an extraordinary weapon, Wood's longsword was a standard-issue blade from the Royal Guard of Lanuka. Crafted from refined steel, and of considerable quality. Yet when his sword clashed against the stone, the ordinary rock managed to bend the blade in an instant. It pushed it to its breaking point, and, with a resonating clang, the blade snapped. With his sword broken, Wood barely managed to tilt his head in time to avoid the rapidly approaching projectile, which ultimately flew past, cutting some of his hair, and went on to shatter a large tree behind him. To be able to react and evade an attack in such a situation, you must be among the best of the kingdom's royal guard. Greed said, admiration on his face, showing no surprise over the fact that the stone had shattered Wood's blade. Your power is acceleration? No. If it were purely time acceleration, you wouldn't have been able to neutralize our previous attacks so easily. Normally, an object thrown like that would slow down after a certain distance due to friction, and obstacles would further reduce its speed. But your stone maintained its speed even when it clashed with my sword. That must be your true power, correct? You can make any material you touch enter a state of absolute stillness, even when thrown, allowing it to maintain its initial speed indefinitely. It becomes an absolute killing projectile. This was the only explanation Wood could come up with regarding Greed's abilities. As a great swordsman, Wood had a keen sense of high-speed attacks. However, the stone that had flown at him, still maintaining its speed after breaking his sword, defied logic. No matter how strong, an object will lose momentum when encountering resistance. That is a fundamental law of nature. But the rock Greed had thrown completely ignored the rules of physics. Considering what he had already observed, Wood concluded that Greed's power must be related to time stasis. When applied to himself, this authority allowed Greed to ignore all physical laws, elevating him to something akin to a superhuman. Earlier, Greed had been pushed back by Wood's slash, only because he used his authority on Wood's attack. The resulting damage to the ground had indirectly affected Greed. However, when this authority was used on himself, Greed was essentially in a state of time stasis, impervious to anything around him. Your observational and analytical skills are impressive, but even if you can deduce the ability of my authority, Lion's Heart, what good will it do you? Absolute defense, projectiles that maintain their initial speed. There is nothing you can do but despair. Greed said as he stooped to pick up several more rocks, ready to attack Wood again. The Archbishop of Greed was not only a talkative person but also someone who, despite claiming to be selfless, habitually forced his values upon others through terror and violence. Wood's excellence irritated Greed. Even if it wasn't originally part of his mission, Greed now aimed to eliminate Wood. Usan archbishops of the witch cult are truly something else. First, there was the diligent sloth, and now a selfless Greed. In my eyes, you're just another hypocrite who claims selflessness while boasting about your existence and forcing your values on others through violence and fear. Wood taunted. You enjoy making weaker opponents despair by flaunting your supposedly invincible powers, and when you encounter someone better than yourself, you try to negate them and make them yield through sheer force. Wood created another longsword out of ice and covered it with hockey. In this loop, I haven't encountered sloth yet, so I'll say this to you instead. There is no such thing as an invincible ability. Unless, of course, you have something like Reinhardt's chi-level blessing of immortality. But based on what I've seen so far, your so-called invincibility isn't truly invincible. I've already found two possible weaknesses. As Wood spoke, he kicked off the ground with the instant transmission technique, using an incredible burst of speed to close the gap between himself and the Archbishop of Greed. You boast too much. My authority is truly invincible. There are no weaknesses. Greed's authority was the manifestation of his egotistical desire. Wood's words were denying his value. Something Greed couldn't accept. Though Wood's speed was great, Greed barely managed to track his movements through afterimages, throwing one of the stones he had picked up. What had been a simple rock was now a lethal weapon in the hands of Greed. The first stone missed and landed near Wood's feet, shattering the ground and leaving a crater several meters in diameter. The second stone was aimed at Wood's shoulder, and as it neared, Wood swung his ice sword and intercepted it. Greed watched, confident that Wood's ice blade would be shattered and that his body would be pierced. Only to be stunned when the ice sword met the stone, causing sparks to fly. The refined steel sword had been shattered, but this fragile-looking magical ice blade was holding its own against his enhanced stone. How can ice be harder than refined steel? Greed thought, bewildered. This is your first weakness. Even if the objects you throw can maintain their speed, they are still fundamentally ordinary materials. Once they reach their limits, they will shatter. Wood said, feeling his arm go slightly numb from the impact. He quickly conjured another ice blade, covering it in hockey. Seeing this, Greed's face twisted in fury, and he threw another stone at Wood. But what he didn't realize was that Wood had closed the distance between them. In an instant, Wood accelerated again and lunged at Greed, thrusting the ice blade toward him. You think you can close in on me and do something against my invincible authority? You're deluded. Greed sneered. Ignoring Greed's taunts, Wood continued his assault. From Wood's observations, Greed's time stasis authority seemed only able to affect one target at a time. The first indication was that Greed never threw more than one stone at a time. The second was that, in the beginning, Greed used his authority on Ram's and Wood's magic instead of himself. It was only after realizing Wood's close combat skills posed a genuine threat that Greed shifted his authority to protect his own body. To test his theory, Wood opted for this risky approach, catching Greed at the moment he threw a stone, hoping that during this moment, Greed's body would not be in its invincible state. The hockey-covered ice sword shattered against Greed's body. And Greed emerged unscathed. Not only that, but Greed leaned toward Wood and mockingly exhaled, the resulting blast hitting Wood with the same force as the initial velocity of the stone, sending him flying backward. Your instincts are indeed sharp. In such a short time, you have deduced many things, even realizing that my authority can only affect one target at a time. But you were wrong about one thing. My authority can simultaneously maintain a projectile at its initial speed while also making me invincible through time stasis. This means that I can always be both offensive and defensive. Greed's face was full of satisfaction as he looked at Wood, who had been thrown back. Wood had managed to deduce Greed's weaknesses, but even this insightful knight had failed to overcome him. Crushing the confidence of a clever opponent like this brought Greed immense satisfaction. Wood, if it isn't possible, we should retreat for now. Lord Roswale and the villagers from Arlem have already gotten away. We should be able to leave without much issue. Ram urged as she dashed to Wood's side, shielding him. To be honest, Ram felt that, based solely on their mana reserves, neither greed nor gluttony seemed all that impressive. The issue, however, was their bizarre powers. With no clear understanding of how they worked, fighting them was too dangerous. Ram thought it was best to retreat for now. The authority of greed was truly formidable, but it lacked mobility. He could never catch up to Wood and Ram if they chose to escape. Gluttony, on the other hand, had an ability akin to instant teleportation. However, if he dared to chase them alone, both Wood and Ram were confident they could turn around and take him down. In a typical scenario, Ram's suggestion would be the best course of action. But Wood knew that if they retreated now, once Subaru died again, the timeline would reset. Escaping now would be meaningless. If that was the case, then they might as well use the limited time to gather as much information about greed and gluttony as possible, in the hopes of defeating them in the next loop. Wood was puzzled. If greed's time stasis ability truly had no flaws, why hadn't he just kept it on himself from the beginning, maintaining an invincible state indefinitely? Yet, initially, greed had chosen to use his authority to counter Ram's and Wood's magic, only switching to self-protection after realizing Wood's combat prowess. Chapter 374, The Weakness of the Authority Lies in the Heart. In other words, the authority of the Sin Archbishop of Greed, which he proclaimed as invincible, must have some kind of limitation or cost to maintain. The Sin Archbishop of Sloth had the authority of the invisible hands, and its power was tied to his arms. Then, considering the Sin Archbishop of Greed's authority called Lion's Heart, could it be related to the heart? As Wood pondered over the nature of the Sin Archbishop of Greed's abilities, Ram suddenly spoke up beside him. I don't know if it's just my imagination, but it feels like the smell of the witch diminishes on the Sin Archbishop of Greed every time you attack him. At first, I thought it was just a mistake, but it happened twice, and now I think there's something strange going on. The scent of the witch disappearing from the Sin Archbishop is transferred to one of the others. Seeing that Wood had no intention of retreating, Ram decided to share her observations. She knew she wasn't as smart or analytical as Wood, but as a member of the Ana clan, her sharp sense of smell allowed her to notice things that others couldn't. Just as Ram had noticed the witch's stench on Subaru in the past, Ram could also sense the presence of the witch's scent. The scent originated from the Witch of Envy's power and was called the witch's perfume by the followers of the witch cult. But to those who despised the witch cult, it was simply an unbearable stench. The power of the Sin Archbishops came from the witch, and to Ram's keen sense of smell, it was quite noticeable, so it wasn't surprising that she picked up on these details. You mean that when greed activates that invincible authority, the witch's scent shifts to someone else? Can you specifically point out who among the remaining witch cult members it is transferring to? Wood's serious expression grew even more intense after hearing Ram's discovery. The first time, it was that person. The second time, it was that one over there in the corner. Ram pointed out 2 members of the witch cult, who had briefly emitted a strong witch's scent. Not just one, but 2 people. Ram, from now on, stay close to me. Once the witch's scent shifts from greed, tell me where it goes right away. Recalling how the Sin Archbishop of Sloth had been able to transform his followers into fingers of sloth, Wood suspected that greed must have a similar ability. Although he didn't know what connection the transferred witch's scent had to greed, if he couldn't deal with the invincible Sin Archbishop directly, he would have to look for a breakthrough elsewhere. As Wood and Ram charged towards him again, the Sin Archbishop of Greed still maintained an arrogant demeanor, saying, "Do you think 2 of you together can break the stalemate? Even if there were more of you, it wouldn't matter. My invincible authority makes any number of opponents meaningless. Even if there were 10 times as many of you, so what? I single-handedly conquered the impenetrable fortress city of Garkla in the Volochan Empire, even killing the Beastman General, 8-armed war god Grugan, with ease." The Sin Archbishop had absolute confidence in his authority, the lion's heart. The essence of his ability stemmed from the temporal dimension. It was the power to prevent change. Meaning that he could keep the state of an object or himself unchanged from a particular moment. In essence, it was a form of time stop over his own body. Unless the opponent had similar time-bending powers, no matter how strong or numerous they were, they could never breach his authority. The Sin Archbishop of Greed continued to throw objects at his attackers. Although the power to maintain their initial velocity could only apply to one object at a time, it allowed for continuous attacks as long as he redirected the authority to each new projectile after the previous one missed. With the cost of shattering 2 ice swords, Wood again closed the distance between himself and the Sin Archbishop. Yet the Sin Archbishop remained unfazed, even taunting Wood as he approached. "You never learn, do you? No matter how many times you try, the result is always the same. You can't touch me, not even in the slightest. The harder you struggle now, the more despair you'll feel later." Despite the dangerous situation, the Sin Archbishop of Greed continued to spout his arrogant remarks, showing no awareness of the peril he was in. "Wood, the second person from your left, about 100 meters away." As the Sin Archbishop was smugly mocking Wood, expecting him to give up, Ram, following closely behind Wood, suddenly pointed towards a member of the witch cult. "Got it." Upon hearing Ram's words, 2 distinct expressions emerged. Wood looked surprised but hopeful, while the Sin Archbishop appeared shocked and horrified. He couldn't understand what had gone wrong, but he knew that his authority's weakness had been exposed. When he saw Wood suddenly rushing towards the person holding his heart, he had no choice but to use the ability Little King to transfer his heart again. That's right. Just as Wood had suspected, there was no such thing as an invincible power in the world. The Sin Archbishop's time stop also had its weaknesses. The reason why he was immune to all attacks was due to Lion's heart, which allowed his physical body to be frozen in time. It was the reason why, even after a century, he still looked like a teenager. However, there was a limit. Though he could freeze his body, his heart had to keep beating. If he tried to stop his heart completely, it would cause excruciating pain, and he could only endure it for 5 seconds at most. To fully utilize Lion's heart, he needed the authority of Little King. This allowed him to store his heart in another person, merging it with theirs so that his physical body could be stopped without him dying. The targets of this transfer had to be within the Little Kingdom, which was a metaphorical space. The individuals he considered his wives. As long as one of his wives had his heart and was within a certain range, Little King could sustain the lion's heart. When the scent of the witch transferred to one of them, that indicated where his heart was currently stored. If the wife housing his heart was killed, the Sin Archbishop would also die. This was why he had shown such terror when Wood charged toward one of the cultists. Seeing the Sin Archbishop's panicked expression, Wood knew he had guessed correctly. Just as Wood was about to bring his eyes blade down on the cultist who housed the Sin Archbishop's heart, Ram called out again. "Wood. The witch's scent has shifted again. This time, it's 10 meters to your right. As long as the target remained within the Little Kingdom, the Sin Archbishop of Greed could shift his heart freely." Clearly, as Wood moved to strike, the Sin Archbishop moved his heart to another person. There were 53 members of the witch cult accompanying Greed and Gluttony, and they were all considered his wives. Spread throughout the village. In the past century, he had married 291 women, each given a number instead of a name. Most were killed on a whim, leaving only the current 53. All were beautiful young women, still virgins, as Greed had never been intimate with any of them due to his own hang-ups. Hearing Ram's reminder, Wood looked at another cultist. Even if he wasn't sure of every detail, he could tell that the Sin Archbishop could shift his weakness between these followers. If he attacked now, the Archbishop could just move his heart to someone else. No choice, then. I'll just have to use large-scale magic to clear the entire area. You may have an invincible skill, but these cultists surely don't. Realizing that Wood was gathering magical power for a wide-scale spell, the Sin Archbishop could no longer afford to be careless. He hurriedly returned his heart to his own body. With his heart returned, he couldn't use Lion's heart for long, but at least he wouldn't die if his wife was killed. Sensing the witch's scent return to the Sin Archbishop's body, Ram was about to inform Wood but saw that he was being intercepted by the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony. She decided to take matters into her own hands, wrapping her wind magic around her claws and lunging at the Sin Archbishop. Without the invincibility of Lion's heart, the Sin Archbishop was forced to evade Ram's wind claws. Unfortunately for him, he wasn't as fast or as strong as Ram. In his attempt to retreat, the Archbishop's handsome face was slashed, leaving a trail of blood. "Damn you, wench. It's all your fault. You're the reason my authority's weakness was exposed." The Archbishop cursed at Ram, seething with rage over the exposure of his once invincible power. His prized face had been marred, his power was compromised, and all because of her. On the other side, Wood was about to take down a cultist after hearing that the Archbishop had recalled the scent, but Gluttony appeared once again, intercepting him. Unable to defend effectively while gathering his magical power, Wood had no choice but to throw a punch. The two fists clashed in midair, producing a shockwave. Compared to Wood's armament hockey and his powerful physique, Gluttony was at a disadvantage. After a brief standoff, Gluttony spat blood and was flung away, his small body carving a deep trench in the ground. After striking Gluttony, Wood immediately flashed over to Ram's side, shattering a stone that had been hurled towards her. The Archbishop of Greed still had his power to keep projectiles moving at constant velocity, and Ram's wind magic wouldn't have been enough to stop it. "Ram, I'll handle this guy. You take care of those cultists so that he can't keep using Lion's heart." Leaving Ram to deal with Greed alone was too dangerous, so Wood chose to divide their efforts. Ram would eliminate all of Greed's wives, while Wood kept the invincible Archbishop occupied. "Damn you. Damn you. I will kill every one of you. Every single one." Chapter 375, Instant Defeat of Gluttony. Ram targeted. It was clear to everyone watching, with the authorities' weakness exposed, the Sin Archbishop of Greed's defeat was only a matter of time. Once Ram had cleared out all the targets that Greed could use for his Little King ability, he would lose the power of time stop. Against Wood and Ram, he wouldn't be able to last for long. Even escape would be a distant hope. No, even if he somehow managed to escape this time, his authority would no longer be a secret, and the title of the strongest Sin Archbishop would be lost forever. Of course, he was unwilling to accept this, but Greed wasn't a fool. He knew that staying any longer meant certain death. Though his face showed rage, his mind was already searching for a way out. As long as that girl hadn't eliminated all of his wives, he was still invincible. There was still time to flee. If the targets housing his heart were all gone, it would only take a few moves for someone like Wood, who had displayed such speed and power, to kill him. Just as Greed was about to retreat, Gluttony appeared beside him, his arm limp, blood dripping from his lips. He spoke. "I touched him earlier." Hearing this, the twisted, angry expression on Greed's face relaxed instantly. "Then what are you waiting for? According to the intel, this guy is the knight protecting the witch's resurrection vessel. You've seen his power. He'll be a threat to us in the future. Hurry up and use your authority to finish him." As a fellow Sin Archbishop of the witch cult, Gluttony's authority wasn't limited to abilities like teleportation. His true power lay in consuming others' memories and names. To use this authority, just as Wood had suspected, certain conditions had to be met, and specific steps followed. The process of consumption was consistent. First, Gluttony would call out the target's name, touch a part of their body, and then lick his own palm. Those whose memories were devoured would lose all recollection of who they were, as had happened with Ram before. Those whose names were consumed would be forgotten by everyone in the world, except for Natsuki Subaru. If both memory and name were consumed, the victim would be forgotten by everyone except Subaru, fall into a deep slumber, and become nothing more than an empty shell. One might think that Gluttony's authority, in comparison to the fog of disappearance of the witch beast, was less powerful. The fog of disappearance could completely erase someone without requiring any conditions or steps. But the truth was that the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony was far stronger than the White Whale. If he wanted, he could even create a second White Whale. Gluttony's power didn't just stop at erasing memories and causing people to be forgotten. His authority had a second phase called Eclipse, which was split into Solar Eclipse and Lunar Eclipse. The Lunar Eclipse ability, when used normally, allowed Gluttony to increase his speed and shorten distances, giving the appearance of teleportation. When he consumed someone's memory, the Lunar Eclipse ability changed. He could extract skills and knowledge from the devoured memory and use them as his own. Since these were extracted rather than absorbed fully, he couldn't physically enhance himself, making it difficult to perfectly wield the victim's abilities. For instance, if he extracted Wood's 6 powers abilities, he wouldn't be able to fully utilize them because his body wasn't strong enough to meet the demands. The solar eclipse allowed him to take on the appearance of the devoured target, embodying them completely, and use their full physical capabilities. In simpler terms, with the lunar eclipse, he could extract skills from someone's memory. With the solar eclipse, he could transform into the target and replace their presence in the world, using their full abilities. If both lunar eclipse and solar eclipse were used together, it would create a perfect duplicate. This second version of the person would have the same body, abilities, and even identity. No one could distinguish between them. Earlier, during his clash with Wood, Gluttony had been sent flying, his entire arm shattering, but it fulfilled the condition of touching the target. Now, all he needed to do was say Wood's true name and lick his hand, and he would devour both Wood's memory and name. The power was akin to a law of casualty, unavoidable and impossible to defend against. Consume both his memory and name together. Consuming only one would still leave him too dangerous. Greed ordered. Robbing Wood of either his memories or having him forgotten wouldn't change his physical capabilities, so Greed demanded that Gluttony devour both, thus putting Wood into a state of unconsciousness, completely helpless. In truth, Gluttony had already planned to do this. Only by devouring both could he use the lunar eclipse and solar eclipse abilities. Wood's power was too impressive. If Gluttony could replace him, it would be a great gain. With a confident smile, Gluttony shouted Wood Hassan's name, then declared, "I shall feast," as he licked his unbroken hand. But something unexpected happened. It wasn't that Natsuki Subaru had died again. The problem lay with Gluttony himself. After calling out Wood's name and licking his palm, he suddenly felt his stomach churn violently. He couldn't control himself and began retching. "You planned this? You knew about my authority, and you tricked that girl into calling your false name?" To be honest, when Gluttony fulfilled the conditions for his authority and he knew it couldn't be resisted, Wood was a bit worried. As someone from another world, his existence was unique. Not even Subaru's return by death could affect his memory. However, Wood didn't want to gamble with something as precious as his memories. While it was fortunate that he was immune to Subaru's ability, in certain situations, it could also be problematic. If someone else died or had their memory erased by Gluttony, they could rely on Subaru's return by death to reset and try again. But this wouldn't apply to Wood. If he died, that was it. No resets, no second chances. Even if return by death worked on him, the revived version of him might not be him but rather the true Wood Hassan. Yet what Wood hadn't anticipated was that when Gluttony tried to use his power, it simply failed. And from the looks of it, it wasn't because of Wood's unique status but because of a problem with his name. Seeing Wood's confused expression, Gluttony thought he was feigning ignorance and shouted, "Still pretending? Wood Hassan is not your real name, is it? Otherwise, my authority wouldn't have failed." No one knew his powers better than Gluttony himself. The touch was perfect, the only possible reason for failure was an issue with the name. "So, your power only works with someone's true name, huh? Well, sorry to disappoint. I'm an orphan from a slum in Karagi. Anna named me Wood Hassan. As for my original name, sadly, I don't even know it myself." Hearing Gluttony's accusations, Wood almost burst out laughing. Gluttony's power was indeed formidable. Once the conditions were met, it was even more terrifying than Greed's. But who would have thought the flaw was so glaring? With the authorities of both Greed and Gluttony now exposed, the rest would be simple. In terms of raw strength, neither of them was anything special. At least not to Wood. The only reason he hadn't defeated them sooner was the bizarre nature of their authorities. Now that he understood their weaknesses, they wouldn't be a threat anymore. To end the fight quickly, Wood activated the power of the Divine Heart, instantly pushing his physical abilities to the limit. He intended to finish off both Greed and Gluttony in one blow. Runic symbols glowing with a silver light appeared on Wood's chest, shining through his clothes. Seeing the mysterious script, both Greed and Gluttony were stunned as Wood's already formidable magical energy surged even higher. To them, Wood was already a human-shaped monster, but now his presence had grown even more overwhelming. With solidified magic power forming a cyclone around Wood, even lifting small stones into the air, the Sun archbishops were paralyzed by fear. Overwhelmed by the oppressive power, Gluttony fought through the nausea to make his escape. He didn't care about Greed's fate. With his lunar eclipse ability, he could nearly teleport, and escaping alive seemed possible. Boom. Just as Gluttony activated his power, Wood moved as well. The ground of Arlem village, freshly repaired, crumbled under his violent step, leaving a massive crater. Wood shot forward, his speed forming a sonic boom, creating the so-called sonic cone behind him as he rushed after Gluttony. The range of Gluttony's lunar eclipse was limited. If he could teleport anywhere in the world, he would be invincible. But the maximum range was around a kilometer, and there was only a moment's pause between uses. That was why Gluttony had been confident in his ability to survive. He believed no one could cross a kilometer in just a moment. When Wood appeared before him, Gluttony's eyes were wide in shock. His expression of disbelief quickly turned to one of pain as Wood's eyes blade sliced through the air, cleanly bisecting him, and extending through the forest behind, transforming it into a frozen wasteland. Damn it! Where did this monster come from? Why did we have no intel on him before? Though some distance away, Greed saw clearly as Gluttony was split in two, and the forest was frozen in place. The longer someone lived, the more they feared death. Though Greed was an ordinary human, his time-stop ability had let him live for over 100 years. Having enjoyed the power and satisfaction that came with being at the top, he wasn't ready to die here. But Wood was overwhelmingly powerful. Even though Gluttony had escaped a kilometer away, Wood had caught up in an instant and killed him. What chance did he have? Ram was still eliminating his wives within his little kingdom, and the invincibility granted by Lion's Heart was running out. As Greed looked at Wood and Ram with anger and unwillingness, his gaze lingered on Ram, and suddenly, he began laughing maniacally. Gluttony was dead, but Greed could still survive. He had found a way out. Seeing Wood instantly defeat Gluttony, Ram couldn't help but marvel at his strength. She sped up her efforts, aiming to reduce the burden on Wood as he used a divine heart. But as she continued, her movements suddenly stopped. A look of horror and anger crossed her face as she looked at Greed, who was grinning at her from a distance. Chapter 376, The True Mastermind. Ram suddenly froze, her actions ceasing as she stared at the Sin Archbishop of Greed in anger. The reason was simple. As a member of the Ana clan, possessing an extraordinary sense of smell, she had just realized that the nauseating scent of the witch had suddenly appeared on herself. Ram now understood what that stench, which had been moving among the witch cultists, truly represented. She could feel it. Two hearts beating within her chest. One heart was her own, while the other, filled with the heavy stench of the witch, obviously belonged to the Sin Archbishop of Greed. Ram extended her sharp claws, intending to gouge out her own heart. With the Ana's life force and Wood's powerful healing magic, she believed she could survive even if she opened a hole in her chest. But the Sin Archbishop, seeing Ram's resolve, spoke quickly in alarm. I advise you not to waste your effort. I deliberately placed my heart overlapping with yours. If you destroy my heart, your heart will be pierced as well. And at the moment you strike, I can guarantee that my authority will bring the heart back into my own body. The only person who would die is you. The Archbishop wasn't trying to be kind, Ram was his only bargaining chip. If she died, there would be no way for him to escape from Wood. The second ability of the Sin Archbishop's authority, Little King, allowed him to transfer his heart into any of his wives within his kingdom. The definition of a wife was rather vague. Any female the Archbishop personally considered his wife would become one. Ram was undeniably a woman and was within the Archbishop's kingdom, making her a valid target for Little King. To destroy the Sin Archbishop's invincible authority, Lion's Heart. One had to destroy the heart hidden in a wife. But now that the heart resided in Ram, killing Greed meant killing Ram. A dilemma with no clear solution. I'm sorry, Sir Wood. This time, Ram has become a burden. I shall atone for this. Ram apologized while raising her hand, preparing to pierce her heart and take the Sin Archbishop with her. Just as her claws broke through her own pale skin, drawing a few drops of blood, Wood appeared beside her, grabbing her wrist. Are you out of your mind? As that bastard said, even if you kill yourself, he can still use his authority to retrieve the heart. Your death would be meaningless. Don't expect me to save you either. If your heart is destroyed, your bodily functions will cease within minutes, and with my current abilities, I can't bring someone back from the dead. But if I die, the Sin Archbishop's heart transfer authority won't work anymore. You are a man, Sir Wood, and thus not a target for his ability. If I die, he won't be able to escape from you. Ram was stubborn, even after Wood's intervention. If that's the case, then what was the point of me coming here? The Sin Archbishops of Greed and Gluttony aren't my personal enemies. The main reason I am here is because of you. To Wood, trading Ram's life for the Archbishops wasn't worth it. Greed's weakness had been exposed, and there would be plenty of chances to kill him later. But Ram was a valuable ally. Losing her to eliminate an opponent he could kill any time was too much of a loss. So, you've finally grasped the situation. That's right, if you want to kill me, the Ana girl will die before I do. How about we reach a compromise? Let me leave, and once I'm safe, I will take my heart back from this girl. The Archbishop didn't threaten Ram's life to force Wood into submission or continue fighting. He couldn't afford to take that risk. He had no idea how much Ram meant to Wood, but he was confident that if Wood's own life was at stake, he wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice the Ana girl. If he were in Wood's shoes, he would make the same decision. Tell me why the witch cult has been so active lately, and what kind of person is the Witch of Vainglory, Pandora? Hearing Wood's demands, the Sin Archbishop knew this was Wood's condition for letting him go. If he didn't provide the information, Wood might very well forcefully end things right here. That half-elf, Amelia, is the perfect vessel for the Witch of Envy's resurrection. She's also the key to reviving Satella. We weren't aware of her existence before, but after the royal selection in Lunica, a man named Roswell came to us and made certain deals. Ram's body trembled violently as she heard these words. She had never imagined that her revered Lord Roswell was involved with the witch cult. The attack on Arlem village had been orchestrated by him. No. Gluttony and greed had come because of Roswell's information. That meant she, left behind as a rear guard, had been a pawn from the beginning. A disposable piece in Roswell's game. Ram collapsed to the ground, utterly shattered. The betrayal of the man she loved was a blow that would be difficult for anyone to endure. Wood didn't doubt the Archbishop's words. He had always found Roswell suspicious, his motives unclear, and had never seen him as a purely good character. Roswell might have decided to get rid of Ram because he sensed her changes and the threat she might pose to his plans after regaining her powers. Wood even suspected that the witch cult was merely a tool for Roswell to manipulate. By exposing Amelia, Roswell could eliminate Ram, who could be an obstacle, and simultaneously force Amelia into sanctuary. Aside from the witch cult's recent activity and Roswell's betrayal, the Archbishop had little useful information about Pandora, the Witch of Vainglory. It wasn't that he didn't want to say more. Pandora was simply too mysterious. Although greed had worked with her during the attack on the Elven village where Amelia grew up, all he knew was that she possessed the power to alter and twist reality. Her true goals and background were a complete mystery. From various legends and history, combined with Sloth's dying words, Wood had a feeling that the greatest enemy in this world wasn't Satella, the Witch of Envy, whom everyone feared, but rather Pandora, the Witch of Vainglory. Wood wasn't surprised that the Archbishop knew little about Pandora. If she were the ultimate antagonist, it wouldn't make sense for her identity to be so easily exposed. With all the information gathered, the Archbishop slowly began backing away, putting more distance between himself and Wood. The man was cunning. Fearing that Wood might not keep his word, he had ordered his remaining wives to leave beforehand while providing the information. Once he had escaped far enough, and Ram was no longer within his kingdom, he could still use the wives who had fled to ensure the continued use of Lion's Heart. Wood clicked his tongue in annoyance, but in the end, he could only watch as the Sin Archbishop disappeared from view. To be honest, Wood hadn't intended to keep his promise from the beginning. Promises were for honorable men. For someone like the Sin Archbishop, Wood had no qualms about breaking his word. Besides, Wood never claimed to be a moral hero. The Sin Archbishop of Gluttony was dead, greed had escaped, and Ram was broken. But time hadn't reset, which meant that Subaru still wasn't dead. If you have time to feel sad, it's better to hurry and help Subaru and the others. If I'm not wrong, Rem and Amelia are already there, and they're up against the White Whale and a Sin Archbishop of Sloth. Perhaps it was her sisterly bond. Though Rem had been devastated by Roswell's betrayal, she found new resolve when she heard that Rem was facing such danger. When Wood and Ram finally reached Subaru and the others, they were surprised to find that the White Whale had already been defeated. The Sin Archbishop of Sloth was still being attacked by everyone, and had they arrived any later, there wouldn't have even been an opportunity to assist. Through numerous return-by-death loops, Subaru realized Wood must have been dealing with something on his end, explaining his absence. With Wood missing, Subaru had to make use of whatever he had, and after multiple loops, he had gathered enough information and devised a plan. In the previous loops, Subaru learned from Cross that Wilhelm and Julius could defeat the White Whale under normal circumstances. It was only when the Sin Archbishop of Sloth intervened that their plans failed. Knowing this, Subaru's strategy this time around was simple but effective. During the final loop, Subaru didn't get lost in the White Whale's fog. Instead, he diverted course and intercepted Sloth before he could assist the White Whale. Of course, someone like Ricardo wasn't keen to take orders from a weakling like Subaru. But that was fine. During the previous loops, Subaru learned that Ricardo and his men were terrified of Wood. So he pointed out that Anastasia, Wood's sister, was in danger, and if they didn't help, Wood would surely not forgive them. Half threatening them by invoking Wood's name, and half convincing them that helping Anastasia would earn Wood's gratitude, Subaru finally persuaded Ricardo and his men to intercept Sloth. Subaru was well prepared. With a full understanding of Sloth's authority and his ability to see the invisible hands, Ricardo was able to buy enough time for Cross and the others to take down the White Whale. With the White Whale dead, Cross's group was able to help against Sloth, resulting in the current scenario. See, didn't I tell you? Even if I can't contribute much in battle, my brains and wits are more than enough to help Amelia. Subaru boasted. Wood didn't undermine him this time. He had to admit, Subaru had done an excellent job. If Wood were in Subaru's position without his combat skills, he doubted he could have done any better. In fact, without Subaru, the best-case scenario would have been Wood obtaining some information while Ram ended up losing her memory again. It had been almost impossible to protect both Ram and gather the information at the same time. In that situation, Ram losing her memory would have been a fortunate outcome. How did things go on your side? Did you figure out what was happening? Seeing Ram and Wood arrive, Subaru asked anxiously. Wood didn't hold back and shared everything. His encounters with the Sin Archbishops of Greed and Gluttony, and the intel about Roswell's betrayal. Amelia found it hard to believe that Roswell wanted to kill her. He had taken her in since she awakened. If he wanted her dead, he'd had plenty of chances. Why involve the witch cult? Roswell isn't necessarily aligned with the witch cult, nor does he want to kill you, but he certainly has his own goals. So, what's your plan? Do you want to strike out on your own, free from Roswell's control, or pretend nothing happened and continue relying on him in the royal selection? Chapter 377, The Shield of the Sanctuary. What are you talking about? Now that we know Roswell has ulterior motives, why would we stick with him? That's just seeking death. Before Amelia could say anything, Natsuki Subaru had already interjected emotionally in response to Wood's suggestion. Having dealt with the White Whale and the Archbishop of Sloth, Subaru now understood that the so-called witch cult were nothing but madmen. Dangerous individuals. Since Roswell dared to associate with such people, he was evidently a complete lunatic. Subaru, seeing Amelia as his goddess, certainly didn't want her to knowingly walk into danger by heading to the sanctuary. While losing Roswell's support would be a significant setback for their faction, Cross had already extended her hand to them following their recent victories. They could certainly join forces with Cross to defeat the other competitors in the royal selection. I already said, Roswell might not necessarily want to harm Amelia. He may just want to use her to achieve some goal. Otherwise, considering his strength, even with Puck around, Amelia might not be enough to stand against him. Subaru still wanted to argue, but he was interrupted by Amelia, who had remained silent until now. I'm going to the sanctuary. On one hand, it's to help the villagers of Arlem, and on the other, it's for myself. There's something about my origins. About my connection with the Witch of Envy, Satella. That Roswell must know. After a moment of silence, Amelia spoke seriously, and her decision didn't surprise Wood at all. He didn't know what kind of person the Witch of Envy was, but the Amelia he knew was pure and kind, like a blank sheet of paper. Now that she understood she was the cause of innocent villagers getting involved, there was no way she'd stand idly by. Wood also had a feeling that going to the sanctuary would provide answers to many lingering questions, so he leaned toward Amelia making that journey. After dealing with the White Whale, Wood and the others returned to Roswell's mansion and obtained a keystone from the head maid, Frederica. The keystone was necessary for mixed bloods to enter the sanctuary. At first, Wood thought Frederica, the strict head maid, was in league with Roswell. But from her actions, and information provided by Elsa, it appeared Frederica was just another pawn discarded by Roswell. What convinced him of this was that just before setting off for the sanctuary, Mealy, the beast handler, arrived with a message from Elsa. Surprisingly, Roswell had contacted the underground assassination organization again and had issued a commission. The content of the commission was strange. Roswell had asked the assassins to attack his mansion while Amelia was heading to the sanctuary, and kill everyone there. This everyone included Frederica and Beatrice, the caretaker of the library. Apparently, Roswell had no idea that the underground organization was now under Wood's control. Elsa had accepted the job and taken an ample deposit, only to immediately send Mealy to notify Wood. After hearing Mealy's report, everyone lost any remaining trust in Roswell, and they set off in force for the sanctuary. The sanctuary was on land managed by the Mathers family for generations, under Roswell's jurisdiction. It wasn't far from the mansion, and after just a day of travel, the group arrived before the barrier known as the Lost Forest. The sanctuary was originally an experimental site created by the Witch of Greed. A place where she had lived, conducted her experiments and eventually died. To prevent those inside from escaping, and outsiders from entering, she had placed a barrier around it. Or so the legend went. It had been centuries, and no one knew for sure what was true. In Wood's group, apart from Amelia being a half-elf, the others were either pure-blooded humans or part of the Ani clan. Thus, the barrier didn't hinder their progress. Shortly after crossing the barrier and entering the sanctuary, even before they could find Roswell, two figures blocked their path. The pair consisted of a young man and a young woman, both seemingly not much older than teenagers. The young man had spiky golden hair and looked around 14 or 15 years old. He wore a vest, exposing his lean chest and abdominal muscles. His eyes were fierce, and his sharp teeth made him look wild and aggressive. The young woman had long, waist-length pink hair and pointed ears, holding a staff almost as tall as she was. She appeared even younger than the boy, around 11 or 12. Upon encountering these two in the sanctuary, anyone could tell they weren't here to offer a warm welcome. Especially Natsuki Subaru and Amelia. One carried the scent of the witch, while the other looked like a spitting image of the legendary Witch of Envy. Naturally, both drew hostile gazes from the young pair. The boy is Garfield Tinsel, known as the Shield of the Sanctuary. He's Frederica's half-brother and the strongest demi-human in the sanctuary. In terms of individual combat prowess, he's stronger than Julius, perhaps comparable to the sword demon Wilhelm. The girl is Ryuzu Meyer. Though she looks like an 11 or 12-year-old, she's been around since my first visit here years ago. She's one of the oldest residents of the sanctuary, and even Roswell speaks to her respectfully. Seeing the pair, Ram, who was familiar with the sanctuary, took it upon herself to inform Wood and the others. As Roswell's personal maid, Ram had visited the sanctuary multiple times, so she knew some of its most important figures. Garfield and Ryuzu were among them. Ram also knew about Garfield's blessing and abilities. He had been her suitor, and to rid herself of him, she had often fought him. The fact that Garfield was called the Shield of the Sanctuary spoke to his strength. He had a blessing of the Earth Spirit, which allowed him to heal by touching the ground and even manipulate the terrain to some extent. He also had a quarter beastman blood, and could enter a beast transformation. Either partially or fully. In his full beast form, he turned into a massive tiger, losing some reason but gaining tremendous power. To put it simply, before regaining her Una powers, Ram couldn't defeat Garfield. Even injuring him was difficult when he had his blessing. As for Ryuzu, Ram knew little, but she doubted she was any weaker than Garfield. In fact, even without Ram's reminder, Wood could sense how powerful they were just by looking at them. The boy, Garfield, was clearly a strong warrior, and the girl, Ryuzu, emanated an amount of magic power greater than even great spirits like Puck. Ram, I never imagined you'd fall so far as to mix with witch cultists. If you want to invade the sanctuary, you'll have to go through us first. Garfield, though infatuated with Ram, valued the sanctuary more. Though he didn't want to kill her, he still assumed a fighting stance. Amelia and Subaru tried to explain, but Wood stepped forward to stop them. They know Roswell well. One of you looks like the Witch of Envy, and the other reeks of witch's scent. Did you really think they'd listen? Instead of wasting words, just fight them. Though these two look strong, as long as they don't have troublesome powers like the archbishops, they're not really a big deal. Hearing Wood's words, Garfield, usually arrogant and dismissive, looked irritated. He was about to retort when he realized Wood had already appeared in front of him. Caught off guard, Garfield was stunned. His retort got stuck in his throat. Seeing Wood clench his fist and punch with enough force to create a sonic boom, Garfield quickly crossed his arms to protect his face, abandoning all pretense of underestimating his opponent. Seeing Garfield maintain such composure under pressure, Wood's expression showed a hint of admiration. In the next moment, his hockey-covered fist struck Garfield's crossed arms. Boom! The massive shock wave from the impact burst forth between Wood and Garfield, instantly cracking the ground beneath their feet. Garfield had always been confident in his strength. In a pure physical match, neither Roswell nor Ryuzu was a match for him. He was the strongest warrior of the sanctuary. However, at the moment he blocked Wood's punch, he realized just how much he had underestimated him. The overwhelming force traveled through his elbows and into his body, and soon Garfield found himself unable to resist it. Though his feet stayed on the ground, he was sent skidding backward several kilometers, carving deep grooves in the ground. Seeing Garfield, even with his blessing of the Earth Spirit, blown away with raw power, Ryuzu looked horrified. She raised her staff, beginning to cast a spell, but saw Wood already spinning to deliver a roundhouse kick her way. Recalling Garfield being sent flying, Ryuzu interrupted her spell and used a short-range teleportation spell to escape into the air. Ryuzu teleportation wasn't like the authority of gluttony, it was a yin magic spell, with a very limited range. Wood's mist kick turned into a brilliant blue slash, cleanly cutting through a massive tree behind where Ryuzu had been standing, leaving an unnaturally smooth cut. Watching the enormous tree, which took 4 or 5 people to encircle, collapse, Subaru could only click his tongue in awe. He couldn't help but note that when Wood got serious, he was quite ruthless. Ryuzu was a cute girl barely 11 or 12, and yet Wood had no hesitation to attack with lethal force. Hovering in the air, Ryuzu looked shaken, knowing full well that if she hadn't dodged in time, she'd have been severely injured if not killed. She didn't know what Roswell had done to provoke someone like Wood, but recalling Roswell's instructions and their connection, she steeled herself to act. Hovering above the ground, Ryuzu began gathering mana, and soon the winds of the forest gathered before her, forming an enormous wind spear over 100 meters long. Ryuzu swung her staff down, sending the giant wind spear hurtling toward Wood with a fierce sound. However, standing below, Wood maintained his composure. Seeing the massive wind spear approaching, he extended his own hand towards Ryuzu. Water Saint Magic, Spiral Water Spear. A blue magic circle appeared above Wood's outstretched left hand, and torrents of water gushed forth, forming a massive swirling vortex before condensing into a spiraling lance of water. Chapter 378, A Primal Clash with the Beast. The spiraling water spear collided with a wind lance descending from above, and the clash of rushing winds and surging waters created an explosion of force that rippled through the forest. Water droplets scattered, mixing with the wind, and a sudden storm seemed to engulf the area. As everyone marveled at the high-level magic unleashed by Wood and Ryuzu, an approaching figure disregarded the fierce winds and rain, moving at an astonishing speed towards Wood. Boom! Another powerful shock wave burst through the air. The figure approaching Wood at high speed, undeterred by the storm, was none other than Garfield Tinsel, who had previously been sent flying by Wood's punch. While Wood and Ryuzu's spells had been colliding, Garfield had taken the opportunity to close the distance, hoping to return the favor to Wood with a punch of his own. However, Garfield's punch was intercepted. Like before, Wood had already foreseen Garfield's movements using observation hockey, and he raised his left arm, now covered in armament hockey, to block. The impact met with Wood's hardened arm, and Garfield immediately realized this wasn't flesh and bone. It was akin to solid steel. You really don't learn, do you? Well, this just makes it easier for me. Once I knock both of you out, there'll be fewer obstacles if I need to deal with Roswell later. Garfield's fierce eyes glared at Wood, as if he wanted to say something, but before he could utter a word, Wood's right fist smashed into his face. With his left arm having blocked Garfield's punch, Wood immediately followed up with a crushing right uppercut. Iron Fist Technique, Diamond Smash. The heavy uppercut not only silenced Garfield but broke several of his sharp teeth. A spiderweb of cracks spread across the ground where Garfield had been standing as the force drove him downwards. Garfield hadn't expected Wood to be so dishonorable as to punch him mid-sentence. The force of the punch dazed him, and before he could recover, Wood grabbed his head and threw him violently. From the moment Wood first struck Garfield, then clashed with Ryuzu's magic, to Garfield being thrown again, everything had happened in under a minute. Subaru, Amelia, and the others barely had time to react before Garfield and Ryuzu, the strongest defenders of the sanctuary, were completely suppressed by Wood. Seeing Garfield completely outmatched in hand-to-hand combat, Ryuzu hesitated for a moment before deciding to intervene. However, before she could launch an attack against Wood, Ram suddenly appeared in front of her. Although I believe that Mr. Wood could handle this alone, Ram said. It's not good manners to just stand back and watch. So, I'll be your opponent. Seeing Ram step forward to face Ryuzu, Ram and Amelia also wanted to assist, but Puck stopped them before they could move. Ram has regained her full Ana powers, Puck explained. She might even be stronger than I was at my peak. She doesn't need any help. As for Wood, honestly, I think even if the Witch of Greed, who created me, or the Witch of Envy herself faced him, Wood would still stand a chance. Garfield and Ryuzu were undoubtedly strong. The strongest within the sanctuary and even formidable in the outside world. However, their opponent was not someone to be taken lightly. Ram was the most powerful of the Ana clan, named after the legendary continent Mitram, and Wood could fight on par with Reinhard, the Sword Saint, even while holding back. The so-called shield of the sanctuary stood little chance. As harsh as it sounds, Puck continued. The best way we can support them right now is by not getting in their way. If we interfere, we could end up being a burden. We should focus on finding Roswell. Once we find him, we'll have the answers we need. Roswell always dressed like a clown, but he was a powerful figure. Even more so than Garfield and Ryuzu. Yet Puck wasn't worried about Amelia facing Roswell. As Wood had said before, if Roswell intended to kill Amelia, he would have done so long ago. As Amelia, Subaru, and the others headed deeper into the sanctuary, Wood, who was still engaged in battle, paid them no mind. Instead, he looked with interest at Garfield, who was now transforming into a massive beast. After being knocked around twice, Garfield realized that the sanctuary had clearly encountered an opponent far beyond their expectations. Though Garfield was unfamiliar with Wood's face, he knew the names of the strong people outside the sanctuary, and Wood wasn't among them. Garfield was confident, but not arrogant. Despite giving his all, he had been easily overpowered by Wood. Realizing there was no point in holding back, Garfield decided to use his trump card. His full beast transformation. In his transformed state, Garfield's skin was covered in black and yellow fur, his head became that of a tiger, and his body grew to over 10 meters in height. His strength, speed, and endurance were all enhanced, and because of his increased contact with the ground, his blessing of the earth spirit became even more potent. For minor injuries, Garfield could now heal within seconds just by touching the earth. Though powerful, Garfield disliked using his beast transformation because it caused him to lose his sanity. While partial transformation was manageable, full transformation made him almost indistinguishable from a wild beast. Yet given the current situation, Garfield had no choice. Without using his beast form, he knew he had no hope of defeating Wood. And so, he fully transformed, sacrificing his rationality. Roar. Completely transformed, Garfield roared, his massive tiger form fixing its gaze on Wood before swiping a claw at him. Although Garfield had lost his sanity, he still retained some instincts from his humanoid form, such as standing upright on his hind legs. His huge tiger claw cut through the air, creating a deafening sound. Yet despite the speed of the attack, Garfield's strike missed. Wood had already disappeared from his original position. When Wood reappeared, he was airborne, ready to bring down his heel on Garfield's massive head. Even though you've grown larger and stronger, I don't see how dealing with a mere beast could be harder than fighting a skilled warrior. To Wood, Garfield's beast form was nothing extraordinary. It was similar to an animal-type devil fruit user from his own world. A transformation that greatly enhanced physical abilities without the user losing their mind. By comparison, Garfield's beast form seemed unimpressive. Descending from above, Wood aimed a powerful axe kick at Garfield's head, intending to knock him out and end the fight. However, to his surprise, just before the kick connected, Garfield's beast instincts reacted, and he swung a massive paw upward to meet Wood's attack. Boom. The collision of Garfield's claw and Wood's hockey-covered foot unleashed a shockwave that swept across the area. The sheer force lifted rocks from the ground, uprooted small trees, and even made the tallest ones sway. After the clash, both Wood and the beast-like Garfield were sent flying by the impact, each forced back by more than 100 meters. Landing firmly, Wood looked at Garfield in the distance, a hint of excitement appearing on his face. I thought you'd lose yourself entirely and become a mindless beast, but it looks like I underestimated you. Wood said. You've retained your combat instincts, even gaining a beast's keen sense. Interesting. Subaru and the others will need some time to find Roswell, so I'll play with you for a while. Wood casually tore off his shirt, revealing his well-defined muscles, and looked at Garfield with an expression that hadn't been seen for a while. Battle intent. Back in the Navy Academy, Wood had trained extensively in martial arts. But as he became more proficient with swordsmanship and magic, he found fewer opportunities to engage in pure hand-to-hand combat. Now, facing Garfield, he wanted to revisit that feeling. As for why he removed his shirt, it was simple. In any good shonen battle, showing off muscles was both cool and a way to show increased power. Garfield had gone beast mode and ripped through his clothes, so it was only fair for Wood to flex as well. Roar. Garfield's beastly roar seemed to be a signal, and the fight resumed. In the next instant, Wood and Garfield moved simultaneously, shattering the ground beneath them with the force of their leaps. Each left a deep crater as they shot towards each other, fists ready. Their vastly different-sized fists collided mid-air, yet they felt evenly matched. After that initial strike, they both moved at lightning speed, engaging in an intense hand-to-hand clash. Aura 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 aura. Daiku 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 daiku. At first, they dodged each other's strikes, but as the battle heated up, they started trading blows without restraint. Their fists fell like rain on each other's bodies, neither side backing down despite the injuries. Both had fully committed to this primal contest. Garfield's massive body meant that he took more hits, but his larger fists covered far more area with each punch, equivalent to dozens of Wood's hits. Wood stubbornly refused to use either armament hockey or iron body techniques, believing that this was a true battle between men. Using those techniques would be akin to defending, and though it wasn't explicitly stated, the unspoken rule was clear: the first one to dodge or defend wasn't a real man. Both had ways to recover. Wood had healing magic etched into his body, and Garfield had his blessing of the earth spirit. But avoiding or blocking was out of the question. Blackened fists pounded Garfield's enormous frame, each hit leaving a dent, while Garfield's colossal fists made Wood's bones groan under the impact. This was no longer about skill. It was now a matter of willpower and endurance. Who would outlast the other in this brutal, primal exchange? Chapter 379, Trial on the Other Side. After Amelia and Subaru had left, they quickly found Roswell within the sanctuary. Faced with Amelia's questioning, Roswell was calm, his demeanor different from his usual clownish antics. He looked at Subaru and Amelia and directly revealed his true intentions. My name is not actually Roswell L. Mathers, or to be precise, only this body is named that. The soul inside is actually named Roswell A. Mathers. As for my goal, it has always been the same. To resurrect my teacher, the Witch of Greed, Echidna. To achieve this goal, I've been using soul transference to take over the bodies of my direct descendants for over 400 years. Everything I have done, including leading the witch cult to attack the Honor village where Ram and Rem lived, has been according to the gospel. And today, the gospel shows a new prophecy. After 400 years, the wish I've longed for is finally within reach. At first, Roswell's tone was calm, but as he spoke, he became more and more emotional. It was understandable. Who wouldn't be overwhelmed after waiting and working towards a single goal for over 400 years, sacrificing even their own descendants? Hearing that the destruction of the Honor village was due to Roswell, Rem could no longer hold back and swung her morning star at him. However, before the morning star could hit Roswell, he easily blocked it with a spell. Have you lost your mind, Roswell? Lady Echidna and the other witches of sin were devoured by the Witch of Envy over 400 years ago. There's no way they can be resurrected. Puck and Beatrice were both creations of the Witch of Greed, Echidna, so, in a sense, Echidna was their mother. Beatrice had stayed in the library for centuries because of a promise to wait for the so-called one. A promise she made to Echidna. Puck and Beatrice were aware that Roswell was Echidna's disciple and that he was extending his life by taking over his descendants, but they chose not to intervene. One reason was that Echidna was their creator, and Roswell was her disciple who had done them favors. The other reason was that Roswell's actions targeted his own descendants. It was his family's internal matter, not something they had any right to interfere with. If it were any of the other witches, they couldn't be resurrected. But my teacher is different. Even among all the witches, she was the wisest. As one of her creations, do you really think she wouldn't have left herself some means of return? Roswell's words left Puck speechless. He couldn't deny that Roswell was right. The Witch of Greed, Echidna, could arguably be called the most knowledgeable person in the world. Her greed was a boundless thirst for knowledge. Before she was devoured by the Witch of Envy, Echidna had collected most of the world's knowledge and stored it in her library, which she entrusted to Beatrice to manage. If it were any of the other witches of sin, resurrection would be impossible. But if it were the Witch of Greed, then perhaps. Seeing Puck's silence, Roswell pulled out his gospel, his voice trembling with excitement. This is the book of wisdom that my teacher left behind. A degraded version, the gospel, which allows its holder to foresee certain aspects of the future. Even the gospels held by the witch cult are inferior copies of mine. For over 400 years, I've followed the gospel's guidance, constantly correcting the future. And now, finally, the dawn I've been waiting for has appeared in the book. Do you really think I would give up now? Since meeting Amelia and the unusual Subaru, Roswell had sensed that his long-awaited opportunity was finally here. However, he had never expected it to come this soon. For over 400 years, he had planned and maneuvered, even killing his own descendants and destroying the Anna village. His obsession with resurrecting his teacher was no less than, or perhaps even greater than, the witch cult's fanatic devotion to the Witch of Envy. Whether or not you can bring Echidna back is one thing, but I won't allow you to harm my daughter, Leah. Puck knew well how obsessed Roswell was with Echidna, and he realized that trying to convince him to give up was pointless. Since negotiation was impossible, the only option was to fight. Facing Roswell, even Puck, the great spirit of fire, lacked confidence. But to protect Amelia, he would fight. Puck's small cat form began to grow as his mana surged visibly. His body expanded, and the temperature around him began to drop rapidly. Moisture in the air condensed, and snowflakes started falling from the sky. Subaru, who had always thought of Puck as a mascot, finally realized just how powerful this small, gray cat really was. One of the 6 great elements, the true form of the shining beast known as the Beast of the End, called the Great Spirit of Fire by humans. I haven't seen you in this form in quite some time, but there is no need for me to fight you. If you care about the lives of the villagers from Arlem, you will heed my command and undertake the trial of the sanctuary. Facing the massive Beast of the End, Roswell remained calm. He presented his leverage without fear. Having lived with Amelia and the others for so long, Roswell understood Amelia's kind and gentle nature and knew exactly what she would choose. You despicable bastard. Using innocent villagers as hostages. They are your subjects. Subaru yelled, pointing at Roswell, because he knew, just as Roswell did, what Amelia's choice would be. Despicable? Ruthless? Call me whatever you like. I've struggled to keep my wish alive for over 400 years, killed countless descendants, and done far worse things. You think I'd care about a few villagers? You have 1 minute to decide, either accept the trial of the sanctuary or prepare to collect bodies from Arlem village. The power emanating from the massive Puck intensified as he prepared to attack Roswell. Puck had always appeared kind, but the truth was that the only person he truly cared about was Amelia, whom he viewed as a daughter. The fate of anyone else was irrelevant to him. He didn't want Amelia to take any risks, and killing Roswell was the safest solution. But before Puck could act, Amelia stepped forward and accepted Roswell's deal. She agreed to undergo the trial. Roswell showed no surprise. He had predicted this outcome, having understood Amelia's personality all too well. He knew she would never stand by and watch innocent people die because of her. Moreover, the scene unfolding before him was exactly what he had seen foretold in the Gospel. Amelia wanted to undertake the trial, and there was nothing Puck could do to stop her. Due to the terms of their contract, he had no choice but to comply with her orders. He could only watch as Amelia entered the sanctuary's trial. Worried for Amelia's safety, Subaru, with his ability to return by death, decided to show his courage and join the trial with her. With Wood fighting Garfield outside the sanctuary, Subaru saw this as a rare opportunity to prove himself. He was determined to support Amelia in the trial and, perhaps, improve her opinion of him to surpass that of Wood. The sanctuary's trial, a test left by the Witch of Greed? Sounds quite interesting. Mind if I join in too? The voice belonged to Wood, who had just appeared. He had been outside exchanging blows with Garfield, and now stood shirtless, displaying his well-toned chest and abs, carrying the unconscious Garfield on his shoulder. Wood was intrigued by the idea of the sanctuary's trial, especially given that it was left behind by the Witch of Greed, reputed to be the wisest of all witches. If Mr. Wood joins the trial, then I won't oppose Leah's participation, Puck said, reverting from the massive beast of the end back to his small cat form. Subaru felt a pang of frustration. When he had offered to join Amelia in the trial, Puck had been adamantly against it. But now that Wood wanted to join, Puck seemed instantly reassured. It was clear that Puck had little confidence in Subaru compared to Wood, who not only had overwhelming strength but also a sharp mind. Roswell's expression turned troubled at Wood's suggestion to join the trial. Besides Subaru, Wood was the second anomaly he'd encountered. His gospel had almost no information on Wood, and Roswell had no way of knowing what would happen if Wood participated in the trial. Deep down, Roswell didn't want to take the risk, but he had no choice. Wood's strength was undeniable, and he wasn't someone who could be easily intimidated. Very well, Mr. Wood. If you wish to take part in the trial, you're welcome to do so. But bear in mind, the sanctuary's trial is not about physical strength. Once you enter, you may find it impossible to leave, Roswell said, forcing a smile. Roswell couldn't guarantee he could defeat Wood in a fight, so he had no choice but to agree. Wood, Subaru, and Amelia stood at the trial's entrance, exchanging glances before stepping into the unknown together. The so-called sanctuary's trial seemed to exist in a separate dimension. Once inside, Wood lost track of Subaru and Amelia's presence, and the surroundings were engulfed in darkness. Wood moved forward through the darkness until he found a glowing path, which he followed. After a while, the scene around him changed dramatically. With a blinding flash, Wood found himself in a town. He was standing in the middle of a dimly lit street in the town. Please, let me go. I've already apologized. A sobbing female voice interrupted Wood's thoughts, and when he looked ahead, he saw a burly middle-aged man pulling a young girl's hair. Despite her tearful pleas, the man remained unmoved. He punched and kicked the girl as he yelled. You think an apology is enough? This suit cost me a fortune, and you spilled wine all over it. You're just a poor little girl from the slums. You look decent enough. Maybe if you satisfy me, then I'll sell you to the slave traders and call it even. Watching the scene before him, long-buried memories came flooding back. Looking at his youthful hands and at the girl, who resembled Anastasia in her simple clothing, Wood instantly realized what was happening. I see. So this is the sanctuary's trial. The trial has 3 stages, and the first is facing one's past. Chapter 380, The Witch's Tea? Facing the familiar scene in front of him, Wood couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia. Although he hadn't personally experienced this moment, it was indeed a part of his memories. He was back in the Karagi city-state, where he had first met Anastasia and formed an inseparable sibling-like bond with her. It was here that Wood Hesson, aspiring to become a knight, took a life for the first time, marking one of his most troubling memories. Back then, Wood Hesson wasn't the man he was now. He was merely a child under 10 years old, filled with dreams of becoming a knight. But taking someone's life for the first time, no matter the reason, had left a profound impact on him. The so-called sanctuary trial seemed to be forcing him to face his past again, recreating moments he had wished to forget. To pass the first trial, one had to confront and overcome those memories. For young Wood Hesson, protecting Anastasia was his way of fulfilling his dream of becoming a knight, but the fear and unease of taking a life made a memory he was reluctant to revisit. However, for the Wood standing here today, who had experienced countless battles, taking the life of some scum wasn't something that weighed on his conscience. Wood watched the pot-bellied noble dragging Anastasia by her hair. Without saying a word, he raised his sword, and before the man could utter any threats, Wood had already cut off his head. Not stopping there, Wood slaughtered all of the noble's guards in front of a young, stunned Anastasia. In his original memory, Wood Hassan had chosen to take Anastasia and flee after killing that noble, embarking on a life on the run. But this time, he decided not to run. He stood his ground, shielding Anastasia behind him, cutting down every guard that came their way. More nobles sent more men, and the bodies began piling up like a small mountain until Wood's actions finally drew the attention of the Lord of Karagi. Unable to deal with Wood, the Lord eventually decided to strip the noble family of their titles, bringing the matter to an end. It was evident that if one possessed enough strength, they could break the rules, even become the ones who made the rules. The moment the Lord of Karagi yielded to Wood, the scene in front of him shattered like glass, breaking into countless fragments. So this is the so-called sanctuary trial that no one has managed to overcome in centuries? Humphrey, how boring. Wood muttered, his eyes scanning the surroundings. There was no sign of Amelia or Subaru. Clearly, they were still undergoing their own trials. Curious about what the second trial would entail, Wood pondered for a moment. Suddenly, thick fog enveloped him, obscuring his vision. This time, the scene that unfolded before Wood was a garden, with a picturesque courtyard full of blooming flowers. In the distance, on the grass, stood a set of elegant white chairs and a table, where a woman with a graceful figure was seated. She had striking beauty, long white hair, and wore a sophisticated black dress with a butterfly clip adorning her hair. Searching through his memories, Wood quickly confirmed that he did not recognize the beautiful woman in front of him. Her appearance, with a monochromatic color scheme of black and white, made her one of the most captivating women Wood had seen in this world. Even Amelia and the Crimson Bride paled in comparison. Though Wood wasn't someone easily swayed by appearances, he was sure that he would remember such an extraordinary beauty if they had met before. The first trial was about confronting the past, so could the second and third trials be about the present and the future? However, even if this was a trial of the present, the people appearing here should have some connection to him, right? Yet the white-haired beauty before him had no connection to Wood whatsoever. You don't need to be so wary, the woman said, gracefully standing up with a teacup in her hand. The fact that you are here means that you have questions in your heart, and so I brought you here. This isn't part of the trial you are undergoing. Instead, it's my tea party. Or perhaps I should call it my grave? Your grave. I see. Wood said thoughtfully. You must be the most intelligent of the witches, Echidna, the witch of greed, correct? To think that Roswell has worked tirelessly for over 400 years without ever seeing you, while I, someone unrelated, get to meet legendary figures so easily. Should I say that I'm incredibly lucky, or that Roswell is just really unfortunate? Wood kept his guard up despite Echidna's beauty and apparent goodwill. According to legend, the other witches of sin were devoured by the Witch of Envy 400 years ago, yet here was Echidna, still able to pull Wood into this space and appear before him. This alone was proof enough of how dangerous she was. You don't need to be so cautious, Echidna said with a faint smile. Right now, I am merely a remnant of my soul. Besides, given the power you possess, even at my peak, I might not have been a match for you. I bear you no ill will. The only reason I brought you here is that I'm curious about you. Wood's eyes narrowed slightly. From years of experience in the underworld and across various worlds, he had become an expert in reading people. He could tell that Echidna wasn't lying. Indeed, Echidna's only real greed was for knowledge. Her desire for information was insatiable, which is why she was called the embodiment of greed for knowledge. Her curiosity drove her to pull Wood into this space, especially after seeing how quickly he had cleared the first trial of the sanctuary. She used her authority, the Book of Wisdom, to observe him. But what she found surprised her. The more she looked, the more questions arose. Echidna's authority, the Book of Wisdom, also called the Memory of the World, was a book that recorded all information. Even Subaru's return by death ability, which reset the world each time, was completely documented in it. The Gospels held by Roswell and Beatrice, as well as the witches' cult's archbishops, were all inferior versions that she created by attempting to replicate the Book of Wisdom. The difference was that Roswell and Beatrice's versions were more advanced compared to those of the witches' cult. The Book of Wisdom recorded all the knowledge of this world, including that of Subaru and Amelia. However, when Echidna tried to look up Wood Hassan, she found that the person described in the book and the Wood before her were entirely different. According to the Book of Wisdom, Wood Hassan of this world was an ordinary person from Karagi. Yet, the Wood in front of her, with incredible strength and the ability to easily pass the trial, was no ordinary character. The Book of Wisdom had never been wrong before. Even Echidna herself had not fully deciphered all its secrets. But the discrepancy between what it recorded and what she saw in Wood made it clear, either the Book of Wisdom was mistaken, or the current Wood had replaced the original Wood. Unlike Subaru, who was a visitor from another world. Wood's situation seemed more like he had taken the place of someone who had originally existed here. As the embodiment of insatiable curiosity, Echidna was fascinated by this anomaly. If she had been capable of it, she might have tried to keep Wood here as her experimental subject. Wood was equally surprised by Echidna's knowledge of Subaru's return by death ability. That power was so absurd that it could even affect Reinhard. If it weren't for Wood's unique existence, even his memories might have been reset. Subaru had never been able to tell anyone about his ability, yet Echidna was somehow aware of it. That alone convinced Wood that Echidna was indeed the most intelligent witch. So, Echidna said, seeing that Wood had lowered his guard slightly. Would you care to accept my hospitality and join me for a cup of tea? Seeing that Echidna meant no harm, Wood accepted her invitation. She poured him a cup of black tea, and he cautiously took a sip. It tasted different from the tea Rem usually brewed for him. This tea tastes. Wood began, about to ask what was different about it, but Echidna interrupted with a sly smile. This tea was brewed with my bodily fluids, she said nonchalantly. How does it taste? Unique, isn't it? Wood froze, staring at her with a stunned expression. He hadn't expected the Witch of Greed to be such a prankster, using her bodily fluids to brew tea for her guests. While there was no denying that Echidna was an extraordinarily beautiful woman, drinking bodily fluids was a bit much. Wood suppressed his urge to retch, convincing himself that tears counted as bodily fluids, and decided not to touch the remaining tea in his cup. Echidna seemed to enjoy his discomfort, her mischievous smile betraying a hint of her personality. Clearly, she wasn't just a seeker of knowledge, she was also someone with a deeply cunning side. You say you know about Subaru's return by death ability, Wood said, trying to change the topic. But what is the source of that power? Wood had always assumed return by death was a cheat granted to Subaru by the world, but now it seemed like there was more to it. The power known as return by death is a forbidden ability that surpasses the life source, Adlagna. Echidna explained. It is the Witch of Envy, Satala, who brought Subaru from another world and bestowed that power upon him. The number of times Subaru can use return by death isn't unlimited. It depends on how long Satala's love for Subaru lasts. As for why Satala chose Subaru, I don't know. Even the Book of Wisdom can't guess a person's motivations, especially when that person is the Witch of Envy. And now that I've answered your question, it's time for you to answer one of mine. Echidna smiled. Wood nodded. He had expected as much. They were strangers to each other, after all, and exchanges like this were natural. Who are you, really? Are you still the original Wood Hessen? Wood looked surprised. He hadn't expected even the most intelligent of the witches to catch on to such a nuance. I am indeed Wood Hessen, he said. But the former me lacked a soul. It is only now that I am truly myself. And as you've probably guessed, I'm not originally from this world. I appear in different worlds in different ways. Through reincarnation, rebirth, or direct transference. Each time, I'm given an identity by that world. For the first time, Wood openly explained his simulated life ability to someone else. Since they were exchanging truths, he saw no reason to hide it, and he doubted he could light the perceptive Witch of Greed anyway. Echidna's eyes sparkled at his explanation. As the embodiment of insatiable curiosity, she found Wood utterly fascinating. The mention of other worlds filled her with a longing and an insatiable curiosity for what lay beyond. The Witch of Greed had found a new mystery. One that she was eager to unravel. Chapter 381, The Revival of the Witch of Greed. Faced with the overexcited Witch of Greed, who seemed so thrilled that she might have even wet herself, Wood ignored her questionable expression and posed another question that had been on his mind. Who exactly is the Witch of Vainglory, Pandora? What's her origin, and what is her connection to the Witch of Envy? The excitement that had overwhelmed Echidna just moments earlier quickly dissipated. She seemed taken aback, clearly not expecting Wood to ask such a question. Regarding the Witch of Vainglory, Pandora, my understanding is also limited. While she is considered a witch, she doesn't belong to the group known as the Great Witches. Her actions are enigmatic, and it seems that she was born even before us. A mysterious witch whose existence is hidden from the historical records. However, according to the Book of Wisdom, Pandora possesses the power to rewrite reality with her words. The sloth you encountered previously lost his sanity because of her. The death of the previous sword saint, Thergia, was not only due to the sword god taking away the blessing of the sword saint from her, the white whale she faced was also under Pandora's control. Just like her name suggests, Pandora is a being who brings calamity to the world. At one point, the 7 great witches joined forces to drive her away, but we were never able to destroy her. Some of us even suspected that Pandora might have been involved in causing Satala's witch factor to go berserk, leading to her devouring half the world. Of course, personally, I always disliked the Witch of Envy anyway. Hearing the hidden truth from Echidna, Wood fell into a deep silence. The scope of this world was far larger than he had imagined. Every time he felt he was getting closer to understanding the truth, he realized he had only grasped a fraction of the whole picture. Previously, he had thought that the great witches were the ultimate beings in this world, but from what Echidna revealed, he learned that opposing the 7 great witches were the 7 divine maidens, who embodied virtues like justice, truth, kindness, tolerance, courage, tranquility, and strength. These 7 divine maidens were merely the subordinates of the infinite holy dragon. Aside from the infinite holy dragon, there were 2 other holy dragons, the golden holy dragon and the space-time holy dragon. The space-time holy dragon, in particular, possessed dominion over countless timelines and universes, making it unfathomably powerful. A true power ceiling. Of course, due to the constraints of the world, the 3 great holy dragons could not manifest here, leaving the 7 divine maidens and the 7 great witches as the strongest visible powers in this world. Reinhard, with his inexplicable level of power, stood above the great witches, making him, without a doubt, the strongest force in the current world. While there were many mysteries from thousands of years ago that still eluded Wood, he at least figured out that Pandora, the witch of vainglory, was the main villain. As for her ultimate goal, Wood couldn't say, but it seemed evident that if he could eliminate her, this world would essentially be conquered. Now it's my turn to ask you a question. Having learned the information about Pandora, Wood no longer had anything else he wanted to know. He intended to leave after answering one of Echidna's questions in return. The information I provided about Pandora and the events from 1,000 years ago is not something easily shared. Now, I have nothing else to ask you, so may I propose another request in exchange? Echidna's words made Wood pause, though he wasn't overly surprised. After all, he had revealed that he was a traveler between worlds. There really weren't any other secrets worth questioning that the wise witch didn't already know. Considering the gravity of the information he had received, Wood knew he didn't have equivalent information to exchange. He nodded for Echidna to state her request. However, agreeing outright was not an option. After all, Echidna was the witch of greed, and a particularly cunning one at that. Wood was wary of being trapped. I want to form a contract with you. This way, you can take my remnant soul with you when you leave. If we find a suitable vessel, I can be revived. Moreover, through our contract, I might even have the chance to see your so-called other worlds. Seeing Wood's hesitance, Echidna decided to be frank about her true intentions. Over 400 years ago, Echidna had taken on the role of a savior, using her wisdom to help others. But after becoming a witch, she became the embodiment of greed, consumed by an endless thirst for knowledge. She no longer cared about what had become of the outside world, now she was more interested in the other worlds that Wood spoke of and was filled with curiosity about the knowledge from these alternate realities. Echidna, you can't do that. If you contract with this boy, this dream world will vanish, and we might disappear along with it. If you truly wish to contract with him and leave, you must take us with you too. As Wood was still contemplating whether to agree to Echidna's request, a few other figures suddenly appeared around him and Echidna. These figures were all women, each distinctly different. Lulai, mature women, maidens, innocent types, sundeer, timid. The one thing they all had in common was their extraordinarily beautiful appearances. Given their presence in Echidna's tea party and the way they addressed the Witch of Greed, Wood quickly realized that these must be the other great witches. It was rumored that the great witches had been consumed by the Witch of Envy, but apparently, thanks to Echidna's power, part of their souls had survived. The one who had spoken was a small girl, her body restrained in bindings, even her eyes covered by a black, hardened blindfold. She wasn't dressed that way because of a particular fetish, she was the Witch of Gluttony, the creator of the 3 great demon beasts. Without the restraints, she could easily fall into a state of hunger. The Witch of Gluttony possessed a pair of magic eyes, one of which could induce endless hunger in its target, to the point where they would devour their own limbs without realizing it. Within this space, Echidna evidently held the dominant position, with abilities that allowed her to summon the other witches. The great witches feared that if Echidna left, the space would collapse, leaving their souls with nowhere to linger. And they would truly cease to exist. The Witch of Gluttony was implying that if Echidna wanted to escape, she needed to bring them along. They had been here for hundreds of years, and aside from the Witch of Sloth, who was too lazy even to breathe, most of them longed for resurrection. I'm sorry, but I refuse your request. Propose something else. There's no way I'm letting 6 women bind their souls to my body. Even if I agreed, it's doubtful you could follow me when I leave this world. Wood wasn't about to accept such an outrageous proposal. After all, these were the fearsome great witches. He had no idea if they had ulterior motives, and he wasn't about to take the risk. Even if we can't leave this world, that's fine. Just form a contract with me. Besides, to make you feel secure, I won't try to enter your body. You just need to find a girl named Ryuzumeyer for me. If I want to use a vessel, It must be compatible, and now I only need a contractor to free me from my shackles. Echidna's soul had been bound here by the divine dragon to suppress the power of the Witch of Envy. The other 5 great witches had their souls preserved by Echidna and resided in her mind space. If I were to form a contract with you, what limitations or negative effects would it have on me? Hearing Wood's question, Echidna appeared slightly offended. Even as a great witch, seen from the perspective of humanity as a villain, there had always been countless people yearning to contract with him and receive their love and power. Yet here was Wood, clearly skeptical of her offer. The contract is equal, though in many ways advantageous for you. Just like a pact between humans and spirits, though seemingly balanced, it is the spirit who ultimately follows the contractor's command. Moreover, if either of us were to die, it wouldn't affect the other. Upon forming the contract, I would escape this place, and you would gain an increase in magical power, as well as a portion of my authority. Ultimately, Wood agreed to make a contract with Echidna, the Witch of Greed, as it clearly benefited him as she described. He then left her mental space and effortlessly captured Ryuzu Meyer, who had been fighting Ram. Seeing Echidna's soul, Ryuzu was deeply shocked but, following the promise made over 400 years ago, provided her body as a vessel for the witch. With Wood's contract, Echidna escaped the bindings of her tomb and then took residence in Ryuzu's prepared vessel. Thus, the Witch of Greed, Echidna, who should have perished 400 years ago, was resurrected. Sensing her return, Roswell raced to her. Upon seeing the figure that had haunted his dreams for centuries, his whole body trembled with excitement. Roswell, you've changed quite a bit. Over these past 4 centuries, you've become quite powerful. Without using my authority, I might not be able to defeat you now. Hearing that his teacher, whom he also adored, still remembered him, Roswell displayed his fawning loyalty. He explained why he looked different. His current body belonged to a direct descendant several generations removed. His clown-like attire was also a conscious decision meant to remind him of his hatred for the melancholy mage. The one who had cornered Echidna and defeated him years ago. However, Echidna seemed indifferent, brushing off his explanation with a simple "you've worked hard." It was clear that to Echidna, Roswell was nothing more than a talented disciple. Seeing how Roswell, who trembled with excitement just from being acknowledged with those 3 words, made Wood realize how pitiable the man was. Forsaking the loyal on a girl for unrequited devotion. And after waiting 4 centuries, doing all those things, he was rewarded with nothing more than Echidna's indifference. Wood had thought Subaru was bad with his devotion to Amelia, but Roswell had taken it to another level. Subaru at least ended up with mutual feelings, while Roswell got absolutely nothing for his 400-year pursuit. Now that Echidna was back, the 5 other great witches' souls were still within her mind space, and once they found suitable vessels, they too could be revived. With Echidna's resurrection, Roswell's ultimate goal had been achieved. Releasing the barrier around Sanctuary was also trivial for her. The trials didn't matter at all. Yet there was one critical issue that everyone had overlooked. Echidna's soul had been bound here specifically to suppress the power of the Witch of Envy. Now that Echidna had escaped, Satela's power, which had previously been kept in check, was now being unleashed. Normally, the barrier of Sanctuary would prevent Satela's power from causing significant trouble, but the key problem was that Amelia was inside Sanctuary. And according to the witch cult, Amelia was the ideal vessel for the Witch of Envy's resurrection. Chapter 382, The Resurrection of the Witch of Envy. Indeed, after the Witch of Greed, Echidna, was revived, chaos spread throughout the Sanctuary. With Echidna no longer suppressing the Witch of Envy's power, that force found its way to Amelia during her trial, using her as a vessel. Though it was not a complete resurrection, the Witch of Envy, Satela, was notorious for being a calamity, one who had devoured half of the world. Even with just a fraction of her power, she could easily overpower most of the world's strongest beings. Satela, using Amelia as her temporary vessel, was dressed in a long black gown, her fingers unnaturally pale. Her face was obscured by a dark shadow, making it impossible to see her features. At that moment, Satela was facing off against another woman, who also possessed breathtaking beauty. The other woman had platinum hair that cascaded down to her ankles, and she wore nothing but a simple white robe. She looked like an unassuming, lazy girl from the neighborhood. If any other witches had been present, they would have recognized this platinum-haired woman instantly. She was none other than Pandora, the Witch of Vainglory, a figure hidden from history. Pandora had used her words of power to twist reality, gaining control over Subaru. Satela seemed intent on taking Subaru back from Pandora, which led to their current standoff. Pandora had been weakened after being defeated 1,000 years ago, and Satela was also in a similar condition. Pandora's reason for controlling Subaru was to use him as leverage, compelling Satela to go to the Elven Forest and undo the seal, releasing her full power. Those who were familiar with Satela knew that the Witch of Envy had 2 personalities. One was the destructive Witch of Envy, whose madness and cruelty led her to destroy half the world. The other was Satella, who was more akin to a normal girl. Sensitive, gentle, and even demure. Beloved by the other great witches, except for the Witch of Greed. Amelia was not only the ideal vessel for the Witch of Envy but also the key. If the seal was broken, the berserk Witch of Envy would once again walk the earth. Pandora knew how important Subaru was to Satella. Both the Witch of Envy and Satella loved Subaru deeply, enough to grant him the power of return by death to protect him. While return by death was an incredible ability that even influenced fate, Pandora's power allowed her to manipulate reality itself. This meant she could take control of Subaru, turning him into her puppet, even if she couldn't kill him outright. Satella couldn't accept this. She was the Witch of Envy, and jealousy was her very essence. There was no way she would share Subaru with anyone else. Do as I say, go to the Elven Forest and use your vessel to unseal the power, and I will return him to you. Do not try to resist me. You must know, even though neither of us is at full strength right now, I can still influence this boy without any issues. Pandora's authority was terrifyingly powerful. She could use words to twist or alter reality itself. Under the influence of her authority, illusions could become real, and real things could be reduced to nothingness. Return by death was a forbidden power that surpassed the life force known as Odd Laguna, capable of altering entire timelines. But Pandora's ability to twist reality could also influence the world at large. In fact, when Wood had first heard Echidna's explanation of Pandora's authority and abilities, he had wondered just how someone with such a ridiculously overpowered ability had ever lost. Fine, I will do as you say, but I hope you keep your promise. Once the seal is broken, return him to me. And you'd better prepare yourself. Once I regain my full power, don't think you can run away like you did before. The personality currently taking control of Amelia's body was the gentle Satella. But after the shift in her tone, it was obvious to anyone that the dominant personality had switched to the Witch of Envy. With her cruel and violent nature, the Witch of Envy shot Pandora a glare filled with malice. Satella didn't understand why Pandora was so determined to have her unseal the power and regain her strength, but that had always been the Witch of Envy's goal. The Satella personality was kind-hearted, wanting to remain sealed away forever or even be killed. However, the Witch of Envy personality desired freedom and intended to carry on her mission. She didn't understand why Pandora kept helping her unseal herself, even going so far as to create the witch cult. But since Pandora dared to use Subaru as a bargaining chip, she would be the first one Satella would kill once she regained her strength. With Subaru in her grasp, the Witch of Envy couldn't afford to take risks with his life. Ultimately, she had no choice but to comply with Pandora's demands. The Sanctuary's barrier could keep non-humans from leaving, but for Pandora and the Witch of Envy, the so-called barrier was nothing more than a toy. They effortlessly walked through the Sanctuary's barrier and soon arrived at the Elven Forest. The Elven Forest was the same place where the previous Archbishop of Sloth, Juice, and Amelia's foster mother, Fortuna, once lived. This place, once isolated and untouched, had now turned into an uninhabitable ice field. What was once a lush and vibrant forest was now covered in layers of frost, with frozen elves trapped beneath the ice, their forms visible like sculptures. And the person responsible for all this was none other than 7-year-old Amelia herself. When the Archbishop of Greed, along with Pandora, attacked the forest, Amelia had witnessed Juice, who was like a father to her, being driven mad, and her foster mother Fortuna being killed. Amelia's magic had gone berserk. At just 7 years old, Amelia's out-of-control power had frozen the entire Lear forest, sealing herself within until she was later rescued by Puck. Because of her contract with Puck, Amelia had forgotten those childhood memories, but during the Sanctuary's trial, all of those memories had resurfaced, breaking her spirit. The Witch of Envy's power took advantage of this and found its way in. Walking through the frozen landscape, the thick ice could do nothing to stop Pandora and the Witch of Envy. The ice that had remained unbroken for centuries melted away like spring snow as the two approached. They soon reached a stone wall, the place where the first sword saint, the divine dragon, and the sage had sealed the Witch of Envy. Pandora had once controlled Amelia's foster mother, Fortuna, and tried to undo the seal here, but Fortuna had managed to break free, preventing the attempt. I'm quite curious. If you know where the three heroes sealed my power, and you also know Amelia is both the key and the ideal vessel, why not just do it yourself? 100 years ago, you tried to use Fortuna, and after Amelia left the forest, you tried to have the witch cult do it. Indeed, while the witch cult worshipped the Witch of Envy and sought her resurrection, the cult wasn't actually founded by Satella. It was Pandora, the Witch of Vainglory, who had created it. If I'm not mistaken, the reason you haven't touched the seal yourself is because you're afraid of being detected by the Infinite Holy Dragon or the 7 Divine Maidens, right? Your authority, combined with the vainglory factor, allows you to veil yourself. a veil that shields you from the world's awareness. However, if you were to touch the seal of the three heroes, there would be a conflict between the vainglory factor and the seal, revealing your deception. Being hidden from history and repeatedly escaping past battles relies on that ability, right? If the vainglory factor is compromised, all of your enemies will find you immediately. The one who spoke was Echidna, the Witch of Greed. Behind her, emerging slowly through a portal, was Wood. As the wisest of the great witches, Echidna was likely second only to the Witch of Envy herself. Her vast knowledge extended to every form of magic in the world, making a simple spell like a portal child's play for her. Echidna's words were merely guesses about why Pandora wouldn't break the seal herself, but the reasons might also be something else entirely. Either way, with her new partner here, it didn't seem like Pandora would have an easy time accomplishing her goals. Who are you, truly? I have never seen your existence recorded in history. I do not know you, yet you have constantly stood in my way, obstructing my wish. Pandora's platinum hair flowed in the wind, her robe, which looked more like a white sheet, fluttering with her aura's surge. Wood's sharp eyes even caught a glimpse beneath her robe, revealing that she wasn't wearing anything underneath. Unfortunately, Subaru's vacant expression showed he was still under someone's control, causing him to miss this eye-opening opportunity. He'd be devastated to know later. Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is that if I kill you all, I will have cleared this world. Wood spoke words that left both Pandora and the Witch of Envy puzzled, and then, for the first time in this world, he unleashed his magical energy without any reservations. No denying it. Pandora was stunning. Platinum hair, matching eyebrows, flawless white skin and eyes. She looked like an angel fallen from heaven. But Wood wasn't some shallow fool who let his morals sway with someone's looks. No matter how adorable the opponent was, if he needed to, he wouldn't hesitate. The runes representing the heart of the gods glowed on Wood's chest, causing Echidna to blush furiously beside him. She realized that Wood possessed yet another thing that fascinated her. The mysterious runes were likely another piece of knowledge from a different world, and although she didn't understand them, their enigmatic nature captivated her. The Witch of Envy had manifested using Amelia as her vessel, and since he at least knew her, Wood decided not to make her his primary target. Instead, he dashed towards Pandora. With a burst of pressure, the air shattered beneath him, and Wood moved at incredible speed, appearing before Pandora in an instant. Pandora had considered using Subaru as a shield, but when she saw the decisiveness in Wood's eyes, she realized that using Subaru to threaten the Witch of Envy might work, but it would be useless against Wood. If Subaru died, she would lose her leverage over the Witch of Envy. Therefore, Pandora chose to meet Wood's attack head-on to prevent Subaru from getting hurt. The ice blade, covered in armament hockey, cut through the air, creating a powerful gale that tore the ground apart. Faced with such a fierce attack, Pandora remained expressionless. She reached out slowly with one hand, and the massive crescent slash disintegrated into fragments upon touching her body, vanishing. Wood was stunned as he watched his attack turn to nothing. He had heard from Echidna about Pandora's power, but even he hadn't expected it to be this ridiculous. Pandora, the Witch of Vainglory, could twist reality with her words. Using lies to obscure the world's perception, rendering real things non-existent. Such a powerful ability was even trickier to deal with than the Archbishop of Greed he'd faced earlier. If his attacks could be rendered useless, what chance did he have? Could Pandora always remain invincible? No, just like the Archbishop of Greed, there can't be a truly invincible power in this world. If her ability were unbeatable, how could she have been defeated by the Maiden of Truth 1,000 years ago? There had to be a weakness. He just hadn't found it yet. Chapter 383, The Authority of the Witch of Vainglory. Despite being a final boss-level character, Pandora, the Witch of Vainglory, appeared as a white-haired, expressionless girl. Wood had no illusions about taking her down easily. If long-range slashes are useless, then magic is probably just as ineffective. Maybe it's time to try close-quarters combat? From the earlier attack, it was clear that his strike was turned into nothingness upon contact with Pandora, likely because of her authority. Since it became something unreal, naturally, it couldn't hurt her. However, Wood suspected that Pandora's authority had limits. The vainglory factor might only be able to make non-living things unreal. Otherwise, she could simply use her authority to erase Wood's very existence, turning him into nothingness. There would be no need for such a drawn-out battle. To test his theory, Wood gave up using sword techniques, and instead used wind magic solely to boost his speed. With moonwalk combined with instant transmission, Wood already had the ability to move rapidly through the air. With the heart of the gods and wind magic amplification, his speed now surpassed the third cosmic velocity, far beyond the speed of sound. In an instant, Wood disappeared and reappeared directly behind Pandora, showing no mercy as he aimed a whip-like kick at the back of her neck. But to Wood's surprise, his attack did not dissolve into nothingness. Instead, Pandora applied her authority to herself. In other words, Pandora had turned herself into an illusion. No matter how fierce the attack, it was impossible to hit something that didn't exist, and Wood's entire body passed right through her. Boom! A deafening roar echoed through the air as the ground shook violently. The ice covering the entire Allure forest shattered into countless shards under the force of Wood's devastating blow. "It's pointless," Pandora said, maintaining her usual blank expression. "No matter how strong you are, before my authority, it is all for naught. Your will and strength are powerful, and my words may not affect you, but you cannot break through my illusions. 1,000 years ago, the only reason I lost was that my opponent was the Maiden of Truth. Truth and illusion naturally oppose each other, so in a sense, my power was countered by hers." Watching Wood shatter the ground and obliterate the frozen forest with a single blow, Pandora remained indifferent. However, her tone revealed that she acknowledged Wood's strength, and she no longer used the elevated manner of speech she had before. Pandora was not the Archbishop of Greed. She was the one who granted authority, not the one receiving it. Unlike the Archbishop, Pandora's power was almost invincible. The key word here was almost. Her ability seemed to have no flaws, but it still had limitations. Pandora could twist reality with her words, but her authority only affected those within her reach. This meant that her power had a range limitation. Of course, this limitation only applied when targeting others. When used on herself, Pandora faced no such restrictions. Unless she faced someone like the Maiden of Truth, someone whose abilities were a direct counter to hers, she would always remain undefeated. On the other side of the battlefield, the Witch of Envy and the Witch of Greed were also clashing. Unlike the other great witches, who disliked the Envy personality but not the Satella personality, Echidna despised both. Echidna disliked only a few people in the world, perhaps 3 or 4. These included the 2 personalities of the Witch of Envy, Amelia, and Amelia's foster mother Fortuna. Now, 3 of those 4 were here, and Echidna was showing no mercy toward the Witch of Envy. While Echidna was one of the stronger great witches, the Witch of Envy was still beyond her. Fortunately for Echidna, the Witch of Envy was not at full strength, which evened the odds and allowed Echidna to hold her own. Conqueror's Imbuement. 100 Ghosts Sword Style, Atachi. Ferocious winds tore through the atmosphere, slicing not just the ground but splitting the entire Allure forest in two. For the first time, the stoic, emotionless Pandora looked surprised. The reason was simple: her power to deceive the world had just been breached. Several minutes earlier, faced with Pandora's overpowered authority, Wood had resorted to attacking her with every power he could muster. And when he used Conqueror's Haki, he found something unexpected. Even though Pandora had turned herself into an illusion, she was still affected by it. Conqueror's Haki was the rarest of all Haki, possessed only by those destined to be kings. In addition to providing a mental shock, it also allowed the user to imbue their presence with Conqueror's aura. Wood had always thought the potential of Conqueror's Haki had not been fully realized. After all, Oda had only illustrated it to a certain extent. Although he didn't fully understand the principles, one thing was clear: Conqueror's Haki could affect Pandora. Naturally, Wood used the most advanced form of Conqueror's Haki, Conqueror's Imbuement, to attack her. Initially, Pandora had brushed off Wood's attacks, but when the lightning generated from the clash of Conqueror's Haki struck her illusion, she finally began to take him seriously. For the first time, she moved from her original position, but she was not fast enough. The icy blade in Wood's hand tore her robe, revealing a large expanse of skin beneath. What is this power? Why can it affect my authority? Pandora could not understand the nature of Haki, but she could tell that it was similar to the power of the Maiden of Truth, yet distinct. Through several clashes, Wood began to understand why his Conqueror's Haki could counter Pandora's authority. Pandora's authority worked by diminishing things, turning them into illusions that could deceive even the world itself. Conqueror's Haki, on the other hand, was a power that amplified one's existence, projecting the so-called aura of kings and instilling a sense of awe and fear in others. In simpler terms, Conqueror's Haki enhanced one's presence, so much so that it could even shock others' spirits. Although different from the power of the Maiden of Truth, it coincidentally provided a countermeasure against Pandora's authority. While Conqueror's Haki might not counter Pandora as completely as the power of the Maiden of Truth, Wood could now genuinely hurt her. The white-haired, expressionless girl found herself at a disadvantage in terms of speed, strength, and magic, resulting in numerous injuries marring her alabaster skin. Why are you so determined to stop me? What do you gain from this? All I want is to make this world more real. Does what you seek truly compare to this world's authenticity? Like Sloth was not actually lazy, the Witch of Vainglory pursued something that opposed her namesake. The truth. Pandora loathed lies and pretense, desiring a world where everyone expressed their emotions openly. That was her goal. Note, this is entirely the author's conjecture, The lore of Re is so complex that it ends up contradicting itself. When the Witch of Envy devoured someone, she could see their thoughts. In other words, she merged consciousness with them. Pandora's goal was for the Witch of Envy to resurrect and devour the world, creating a unified consciousness, devoid of deception and illusion. Each person would be able to clearly perceive the thoughts of others. A mad girl with a mad plan, her extreme beliefs were no different from a certain dancing madman from another world. From her perspective, she was not inherently evil, but to achieve her goal, she committed countless atrocities. I have no interest in the authenticity of this world. Wood replied. But I do understand that your persistence will bring trouble to many innocent people. Deception and falsehoods may not be virtues, but they are part of what makes people whole. A world without lies? Trust me, if such a world truly existed, it would only destroy itself even faster. For a witch of vainglory, your actions are incredibly foolish. You're denying your very existence. It wasn't that Wood particularly wanted to lecture a centuries-old girl about life. The truth was that without using his words, he couldn't hope to defeat her anytime soon, and there was a chance he could lose. Yes, Conqueror's hockey could counter Pandora's authority, but Conqueror's imbuement required a considerable amount of energy, and the heart of the gods also had its limits. Burning life force had a time constraint. At the current rate of progress, Wood would run out of strength before he could defeat Pandora. He had hoped that Echidna could quickly handle the Witch of Envy and come help him. However, it turned out that the Witch of Greed was quite unreliable. Not only did she fail to contain the weakened Witch of Envy, but she also allowed her to break the seal in the Elven Forest. To be precise, the one who broke the seal was Puck. Or rather, Puck was forced to do it. One shouldn't forget that the Witch of Envy was currently using Amelia's body. Since Amelia had a contract with Puck, the Witch of Envy had summoned Puck all the way from the sanctuary and forced him to break the seal. Once the seal placed by the three heroes was broken, the power of the Witch of Envy, which had been sealed away, flooded the entire Elven Forest like a tidal wave. The rampaging witch factor dyed half the sky a dark shade of purple. From Lunaka to the sanctuary, to Karagi, to the water capital. Across every corner of the world. One only had to look up to see a black-robed figure looming over the sky. The Dragonstone in Lunaka, the descendants of the great sage at the Sage's Tower, and the current sword Saint Reinhard all turned their gazes skyward. As those most closely connected to the three heroes, they could clearly feel that the Witch of Envy, who had once brought great calamity to the world, had returned. The Witch of Envy once devoured half the world. Now, with her return, she was poised to devour the other half. Seeing that the Witch of Envy had fully revived and that her objective was complete, Pandora had no desire to continue her fight with Wood. Her body gradually faded away as she vanished from sight. As for Wood, watching Pandora's illusionary figure disappear, he had no intention of pursuing her. After all, the entire world was now in jeopardy. Before him stood the fully revived Witch of Envy, against whom Echidna was utterly powerless. In fact, since the beginning of their battle, Echidna had been calling for Wood's help through their contract. When Wood finally arrived, he saw black shadows converging to form a massive arm, which had entangled Echidna, attempting to drag her into a swirling vortex. 100 Ghosts sword style. Wind slash, Atachi. A violent gust of wind howled through the air, conjuring a giant weasel with razor-sharp claws, spinning rapidly. The massive crescent slash severed the black arm and left a canyon, several kilometers long, carved into the ground. What on earth are you doing? Didn't you say that the Witch of Envy wasn't at full strength and that you'd have no problem dealing with her? Is this what you meant by no problem? If I'd arrived a moment later, you'd be back where you were 400 years ago. Being devoured. Echidna, freed from the grasp of the shadows, appeared beside Wood, who immediately chided her. They had made their plans before leaving the sanctuary. Wood was confident, but even he wasn't foolish enough to try to face two final bosses simultaneously. Originally, Wood was supposed to handle the Witch of Envy while Pandora would be Echidna's responsibility. But the most brilliant Witch of Greed had insisted on taking on the Witch of Envy herself, boasting of their past enmity and how, in her weakened state, the Witch of Envy would not be a match for her. Chapter 384, The Possibility of Defeating the Witch of Envy. I never expected her to suddenly summon the artificial spirit I created back then. Plus, I only just got revived recently. I haven't fully adjusted to this vessel yet. Seeing the situation rapidly deteriorating, Echidna looked embarrassed. After all, she bore most of the blame for allowing the Witch of Envy to revive. What do we do now? Does the Witch of Greed have any fatal weaknesses? I can't hold out much longer in my current state. If we don't stop her soon, the only option left for us is to lie down and wait for death. Because of the cost of using the heart of the gods. Wood's life force was rapidly depleting. It was only a matter of time before he died. The question was, could he do anything worthwhile before that? Wood really wanted to complain. Sure, the heart of the gods was powerful, And it had always been his trump card across multiple worlds. But while the power was incredible, the side effects were a real pain. Every time, it was a fight fueled by sacrificing his life. If he had been a long-lived race like an elf or a dragon, it wouldn't have been a problem. With the right setup, he could have used the power freely. But every life he simulated was that of an ordinary human. Normal humans live only 70 to 80 years, which wasn't nearly enough to support an ability like Heart of the Gods that burned through life force. If the Witch of Envy had any weaknesses, we wouldn't have all been swallowed up 400 years ago, nor would half the world have been consumed. She is nearly an immortal being now, incapable of being killed by any means. The only option is to seal her again, like the three heroes did back then. And we have to do it quickly, as her power will continue growing with each passing moment. The Witch of Envy, who had swallowed half the world and 6 of the great witches, was practically an immortal entity. Even if Reinhardt, the cheat-level sword saint, appeared now, he could only fight her to a standstill. Considering one of them couldn't die and the other had the cheat-like blessing of the Phoenix, they could literally fight forever without a clear outcome. You great witches really are ridiculous. I thought that maybe this time I could conquer this world while staying alive, but in the end, it looks like I'll still end this simulation with death. If we can weaken her abilities enough, we can seal her, right? If you have the chance, take Amelia and Subaru and get out of here. After all, I share half the blame for this disaster. Feeling the almost tangible mana in the air,